in charge.
Yes.
Business confidence, everything's great.
Got a great deal from China. It's only 60 times worse than the one they gave Indonesia.
Kids are safe in this country, jobs are safe.
Nurses.
Everyone can buy a house, A&E. I mean, it's all working brilliantly.
Well, don't worry, because Keir Starmer's got the answer. It's AI.
It's AI.
That's all cupping up this morning,
It's
isn't
aye,
it? Aye. Why aye? If you're in Geordie land, obviously
it's
up north. I think probably is right. This is, of course, the home of common sense, despite what anybody may tell you. Julia Hartley-Brewer is next. I'll be back at 6 tomorrow. Bye.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
A very, very good morning to you. This is Talk, the home of common sense. Great to have your company. Thank you very much indeed for joining us. Awful lot to talk about on this beautiful, sunny but very chilly Monday morning. And whether you are listening to us on DAB Plus Radio or on your smart speaker, whether you are watching us on YouTube or on your connected device, it's great to have your company. Coming up in this hour, we're going to be talking about the Treasury ordering cabinet ministers to be ruthless in identifying public spending cuts and cutting waste ahead of the spending review this spring as government debt costs soar, and Rachel Reeves, bleary-eyed, returns from China after getting, from the second biggest economy in the world. What did she get? Let me check my notes. £600 million of investment. I mean, wow. I mean, frankly, I think I could probably get that if I popped over there for a weekend, for goodness sake. The economy is in the dumps. Business confidence in the dumps. We're looking at inflation going up, interest rates going sky high, energy costs, 3 to 5 times higher than anywhere around the world. But no, everything's absolutely fine. We're going to do a bit of cutting when it comes to government spending. God, Isn't that what they told the Tories off for the austerity years under Cameron and Osborne? Well, we're going to be talking about all of that because Rachel from Accounts, it turns out, isn't very good at this whole Chancellor thing. Who knew? Who would have guessed? Well, apart from me and you and pretty much everyone who was sane in this country. But anyway, we'll be talking about that. Plus, damning figures have revealed that the NHS hospitals have left a record 500,000 patients lying on trolleys in A&E for at least 12 hours last year. Those are astonishing figures. They're now planning on just fitting, you know, oxygen hubs and other things into the corridors by basically completely accepting that this is now the norm. Big push from the government today to sort of boost the economy, they reckon, is Keir Starmer announcing they're going to turbocharge Labour's growth plans by announcing new AI, artificial intelligence growth zones. They're going to include enhanced access to electricity. So I assume that means less for us, and easier planning approval for data centres. The only problem is, of course, AI uses up extraordinary amounts of electricity. What's the one thing we're short of? Oh, almost had the lights turned off last week. Electricity. Funny that, isn't it? Not entirely sure that being a socialist Prime Minister, as he has openly said in the election campaign, and basically making our energy costs even higher, is really going to be calling on many massive AI companies or startups to stay here in Britain. Also going to be talking more about the grooming gangs, the rape gangs. Nigel Farage has hit back at Wes Streeting, the Health Secretary, accusing him of attempting to cover up the truth about the rape gangs after the Health Secretary warned that inflammatory speech could lead to a mosque massacre similar to the right-wing mosque massacre we saw in New Zealand a few years ago. This is Talk. Welcome to the Home of Common Sense. Welcome also to former Conservative Government Advisor Claire Pearson, who joins us. Thank you so much for joining us today. Now, if you're watching on the telly or on the YouTube, whatever we're on this week, so difficult to keep up. Claire has got a lovely little fur number on there, which would be great if the studio was as cold as it has been in recent weeks. But today, randomly, it's boiling hot. So we're just going to we're going to slowly melt, aren't we?
We are, but it's soft and fluffy.
But hey ho. Now, there's lots to talk about today. I'm not talking about spending cuts. The question I want to ask you specifically, though, Rachel Reeves, having gone off to court Chinese investment, made it really clear, this Labour government, that it's all about China, because basically we get pretty much everything we buy from China now. But crucially also, this whole net zero push, this huge net zero push that is the obsession of this government as they basically net zero our economy into the ground, because, of course, it drives up energy costs and it makes it impossible for manufacturers to manufacture here. But also it means we rely more and more on China, who produce the batteries and basically own pretty much all of the rare earth minerals that are required to build anything, electric car, wind turbine, solar panels, whatever. But Labour is courting Chinese investment for its net zero drive. This comes amid warnings today that it could leave Britain vulnerable to Beijing. I want to know what your reaction is to that. I'd love you to get in touch. Give us a call on 0344 499 1000. You can text on 87222. You can get in touch on X at Talk TV. Calls are charged at the national rate. Text costs one standard network rate message. I mean, this, of course, allied to the fact that, you know, we've seen debt costs rise. I mean, I think the BBC might have vaguely mentioned it at some point in the last week. Got vague news in brief. Not that it's important. I mean, there's a fire affecting celebrities' homes. That's obviously much more important in California than our economy going into the depths of Hades. But Claire, the answer to all of our woes, apparently, is AI and China and net zero. How confident are you about this?
Not at all. Really not at all.
You and the rest of the country.
Yeah. Would you trust the government to decide on AI and how it's going to be regulated, how it's going to work, if it's going to work, and who's going to control it?
Or more importantly, who's going to... I mean, you know what?
We're going to pay for it.
No one's going to control... No, let's face it. No one's going to control AI, including even the inventors of AI. Yeah. That's the trouble. But it's going to happen.
Yeah. Maybe we can have an AI chancellor.
Here's the thing. If we're going to have a lot of AI, we are apparently, I think we're third. It's Russia and... Sorry, it's America and China. We're kind of third, but like a long way down, like way down. Loads of AI technology has actually come from Britain. We have brilliant expertise here. We have great innovation here. What we aren't very good at is then turning those companies into multinational companies. We just basically, you know, Google buys it up, or someone else buys it up, or they move to America. They move somewhere where these sort of things are encouraged, where you can get cheap electricity, you can run these things. AI involves absurd amounts of electricity. Our energy costs, industrial use, are 5 times. Electricity costs 5 times as much here as it does in America. You're not going to run an AI company here if you've got a choice between here and America. You're not, are you?
You're not going to keep your servers here because data centres, I know they want to remove all the planning restrictions, but even so, you've still got to put up a massive data centre. It's a massive bit of infrastructure which is very heavily reliant upon electricity.
For cooling it as well. And,
reliable electricity. You can't have it go out. So
reliable? Why would you want reliable energy? Oh, Claire, you and your strange 20th century ideas.
Uninterrupted supply. Wouldn't that be a nice thing, even though the lights were very nearly turned off last week, which the government has skated over, seemingly.
It's utterly mind-blowing.
It is, but we could have an AI government if they're so keen.
They might do better.
Couldn't do worse.
Have you noticed, everyone says, oh, it's amazing. I'm sure it is the future. And I get, like, they can basically, do quantum physics in a nanosecond. And so, so running all the tests for something, for cancer, for whatever. I absolutely get that there is a role for it. And I'm not a Luddite, let's go for it. But there is still an element where I don't know if when you do a Google search now, the AI answer comes up first. It is invariably not remotely relevant or just plain wrong.
Yes.
I mean, the thing about AI, it's learning on the internet. The internet is full of a load of absolute nonsense and garbage.
Yeah.
It's not reliable. And there's talk about how it can be used to sort of, plan, help teachers and help them with their work. It can be used to draft emails and things. I got a reply from someone who'd asked for work experience with my show and then was incredibly rude, didn't respond to my emails, which I thought was quite a weird way of starting out your career. And I wrote a very polite but firm, just FYI, this isn't really how you go about things. And I got a response, and I read it out to my husband, just like, can you believe this incredible response from this person? And I was asked to offer this personal experience as a favour to someone else. So it really was just quite bizarre. And I read it out, and my husband, who works in IT, just went, oh, that's an AI. That's an AI response. Suppose I want to be a journalist, wrote their email to me using AI, and it was terrible.
But we've seen that, haven't we? Sort of Chat GPT and also the online assistants, the bots that you have to speak to.
Yeah.
They might be really good at creating nanoparticles and solving problems, but not customer service when I want to try and cancel my car insurance. Absolute rubbish.
Now, you see, you think when you're having to deal with a chatbot when you've got a complaint for anything, and it's just, did I answer your question? No, of course you didn't. And then you're just still you're kind of in a doom loop.
Yeah.
This thing, I mean, look, we're told, look, AI is the answer. It's going to turbocharge growth, and at the same time, we're also told that after we saw debt soar because of the lack of market confidence. I mean, you can BS the BBC and Sky and ITV into saying everything's fine and pretending everything's fine, but the voters aren't convinced, business leaders aren't convinced, and certainly the markets aren't convinced. So our spending costs have gone sky high. We now spend more servicing our debts than for each new government gilt than Greece has to do, which is just frankly an embarrassment. When all this was happening at the end of last week, Rachel Reeves was on her way to China, but it's all about boosting trade and investment with our one of our biggest trading partners. She came home with a £600 million investment. That is literally money down the back of the sofa for Chinese investment. I mean, that's genuinely embarrassing. That's all they got. I mean, that is literally a thank you for coming, Rachel from accounts, move along. I mean, she's now, we're told, an email that was written last week to government departments from the Treasury saying, we've got the spending review in the spring, which is the normal form of things. You get the spending review every few years, telling them they've got to find ruthless public spending cuts. Also, the old, we're going to tackle waste. How many times do we hear that from your lot?
Everybody pulls that one out of the bag because it normally hides what it is you don't want people to see. So you say you're going to tackle waste and you're being come down really hard on that. So everybody focuses on that, not on the actual problems that you're covering up. Not suggesting that they are, just for clarity. They may be.
I would say by definition, any department with a load of waste in it, that permanent secretary should be sacked immediately anyway for failing already.
Yeah.
I wouldn't trust the person who's presiding over waste that could be easily tackled to then tackle the waste that could be easily tackled. Is it just me? You need a new broom, right?
Exactly, you do. You can't sort of mark your own homework, but you also can't cut your way out of a crisis. It doesn't work. And how many years did we have of the Labour in opposition having a real go at the Conservatives for austerity measures? So
they said it was literally the wrong thing. They said you should spend your way out of it.
Exactly.
And now they're doing the exact...
And now they're doing the
But of course you can't spend your way out of it because you either have to raise more taxes, don't put that past them in the budget, well, the next spending announcement in March, or you have to cut spending. They said you shouldn't cut spending, and they said they wouldn't raise taxes. But I mean, I'm probably going to get both.
We are going to get both, I should imagine. I don't see how you can get your way out of it otherwise.
Do you trust them to cut the right spending? There's plenty of government spending that could be cut.
There'd be lots that you can cut.
I think that most of my audience and I could walk into any government department. I think we could walk into any business, walk into any NHS hospital, walk into any school. We could cut spending. We could cut waste. You have to just ask the people who work there. You come into this building and said to us, OK, what could we cut spending? We would be able to give you 10 good ideas. There is no matter how well run a business is, how well run an organisation is, there are always ways that they can be improved.
They are, and it isn't difficult to have a look at it when you have people doing the same job. So you've got 2 or 3 people basically doing the same job, slightly different job titles, but because it's a civil service, you can't get rid of them. That has to change.
But is the answer courting Chinese investment for net zero? I mean, given that net zero is part of the problem?
No, net zero is going to make us poorer. So why are we asking another country to join in and help make us even more poor?
China thinks it's hilarious.
Oh, I bet it does. Sitting there laughing, it's given them a sort of, down the back of the sofa change for one contract or whatever it is. It's not very much. And they go, well, that keeps them happy.
But basically, I mean, they provide pretty much all of our electric cars because you can't make cars in this country cheaply enough because of the energy costs and the the cost of everything else. They bought up over the last 20 years pretty much every country in the world that produces crucial natural resources that go into making, your wind turbine, your battery, your everything. They own all of that stuff. If we're just buying Chinese cars and we're getting all our solar panels and our wind turbines from there, by the way, they don't last that long. And then you have to put them somewhere. I mean, we're just going to have... at some point in about 50 years' time, if this carries on, we are going to Britain is just going to be... Well, we're going to be a failing NHS with a big pile of wind turbines just all around the edges. That's all we're going to be. We're not going to be anything else. I mean, this is where we're heading. But they are a hostile nation state. Which part of this don't Labour get? No, Cameron and Osborne wooed China. Yeah. Well, that was at a time when maybe it would be forgivable that, they were opening up. Xi Jinping has made it really clear that he ain't that guy. Xi Jinping absolutely wants to become the dominant economy, the dominant political and military force in this world. He is a murderous, autocratic tyrant. Whatever you think of Donald Trump, Xi Jinping is a lot worse. I do not understand why Rachel from Accounts is cozying up to Xi Jinping. We should be doing less trade with China, not more, and they shouldn't be investing in... We don't want their money or their expertise in anything crucial in this country.
No, because we can have it ourselves. And when you look at 40% of all solar panels in Britain are made from Chinese companies with links to slave and forced labour.
And made in factories powered by coal.
Yeah.
I mean, you can't make it up. You can't make it up. It is mind-blowing. I'd love to hear from you. Are you concerned about this? Because this is the sort of thing that's like it's a sort of a big issue. And it's sort of one of those stories that goes to sort of the back of the papers as a think piece. It's like, but is this not absolutely crucial? I mean, a few years back, the Tory government was happy to have, Huawei involved in 5G. I mean, so the company that America bans TikTok, from defence ministers can't have TikTok on their phones because it's Chinese spying. But let's just invest and just buy everything from them. Are you worried about this, particularly with AI? I mean, they're going to have more say over that because, again, they're going to be able to power this, and their numbers are 2 in the world on this. But also the push for net zero, again, it's entirely reliant on China. The point when China goes, we've decided we won't supply anything to you because we're in dispute over Taiwan or something, what do we do then? How concerned are you? And if you're not concerned, why aren't you concerned about this? Labour is courting Chinese investments for its net zero drive amid warnings that it could leave Britain vulnerable to Beijing. Get in touch, 0344 499 1000. Love to hear your thoughts also on the public spending cuts being ruthless. I'd love to know what ruthless public spending cuts you would like to see. I think there's plenty of space for ruthless spending cuts. I have a funny feeling, though, all of the spending cuts will be in completely the wrong area. But do give us a call on that as well. 0344 499 1000. We'll put a question out on social media on that as well. Let's also talk about the California wildfires. Massive big political spats going on between the Republicans and the Democrats over, you know, were any reservoirs empty? Yes, one of them definitely was. That's been confirmed by the fire chief. One of the reservoirs was definitely empty. Clearing of the forests and things like, and this sort of, all, you know, and the usual reports here, and in America, oh, it's due to climate change. Yeah, fires in January. We never get fires in January. It's been very dry, but they didn't fill up the reservoirs. There have been deliberate water policies in California. They've had lots of very water-intensive industries and farming, which have used up a lot of the water. There have been water shortages for years in California. All these fancy homes being told you can't water your garden, you can't fill up your swimming pool. Again, you're a first world country. Sort yourselves out. Environmental concerns over some random fish that no one cares about being you can't have water to come from the north to the south, but also a failure to clear dry brush in the forest because environment, all of that. Massive cuts to the fire department, the police department. Huge big cuts. More cuts asked for. There's a spat between the LA mayor and the fire chief. Big concerns that a load of these people are just DEI hires. They've been hired because they tick a box. Oh, are you black? Are you a woman? Are you a lesbian? Are you whatever? And actually, are these people actually the best people for the jobs? We don't know because of those policies. They may be. I don't know. But with those policies in place, difficult to tell. But this has become an almighty, massive public row. And you've got a lot of rich people who've lost their homes. They're all going to sue the hell out of... this is all going to come out in court documents. I have a horrible feeling this is going to be the end of the Democrat California Governor Gavin Newsom, and that's a very good thing. His political career is going to be over.
Yeah, absolutely is. And it's an embarrassment of a state which is bordering onto a massive ocean. They should have had desalination plants along the coast to take the seawater, remove the salt, and then they can use it. But they didn't. They said that they didn't need it, didn't want it, wasn't good for the environment.
Even though they have wildfires all the time.
Exactly. And you've got a huge body of water. Why would you not look at that? But it's all of the ordinary people that don't have the money to sue the state of California that I feel very sorry for.
Yes, we concentrate a lot on, multimillionaire, the actor, this and that, losing their homes. Difficult. I mean, I'm sorry for anyone losing their home in any circumstance. We know, a couple of dozen people have lost their lives as well. People who refuse to leave their homes. But, understandable, there's looting, there's people feel they can save their homes. But actually a lot of people who aren't multimillionaires have also lost their homes. What did you make of Meghan and Harry doing their little visit? Cameras happening to be present. Apparently they did do a lot of stuff behind the scenes as well. There's a lot of emotion and hugging. An actress, Justine Bateman, though, has labelled Meghan Markle and Prince Harry, disaster tourists. The hilarious thing is the announcement from Meghan that her Netflix series, this dire-looking really cooking series, she's going to delay the release because she wants to focus on the people who've been hit by the fire. When I saw that, I assumed it was a spoof tweet. And it wasn't. It was real.
It came up on all the breaking news apps as well. My phone sort of last night.
But also, that's breaking news.
Exactly. That was my
random woman married to a bloke who used to be in the royal family. Says she's delaying her Netflix cookery series is breaking news. Yeah,
I mean, she manages to make this all about her, doesn't she?
No.
Really?
I think you'll find it is all about her. It is about Meghan.
Yeah. But, I mean...
It is about Meghan. Everything's about Meghan.
Anybody really bothered? Do we need to see her sandwich making?
Yeah, no, but also my thing is, it's like, you've just lost your home, you might have lost a family member, you're worried whether where your pets are, the insurance isn't valid, or you got nowhere to live. The cost of rebuilding are going to be off the scale because everybody's going to be wanting builders at the same time. By the way, if you're a builder, move to California now, maybe my top tip. But what you really need at that point is a hug from sodding Meghan.
Yes.
I mean, have they not suffered enough?
Well, this is it. Unless she's going to give them some money to help rebuild their house, I'm not sure what use she is.
Yeah, indeed.
Standing there looking around for a camera.
That's the thing, exactly. Are you handing out useful stuff? Otherwise, no one's interested. Yeah, exactly. Look, I want to talk more about the grooming gangs. I want to talk about other worries that the government has. Tulip Siddiq, anti-corruption minister in the Treasury. Does anyone think Tulip Siddiq's going to be in her job by the end of this week? Because... I mean, I would say,
no.
She's gone by the end of the month, I can tell you that, for starters. But anyway, we'll talk about that and the NHS, plenty more besides. I want to hear from you. 0344 499 1000 is the number to call. Are you worried about Britain being vulnerable to Beijing, with Labour courting Chinese investment for its net zero drive? Also want to hear about the economy and in terms of these ruthless spending cuts on public spending that has been ordered by Chancellor Rachel Reeves. Which ruthless spending cuts would you like to see? Give us a call. 0344 499 1000. This is Talk, the home of common sense.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
This is Talk, the home of common sense, with me, Julia Hartley-Brewer. 10:27 is the time. Claire Pearsall is still with me. Let's go straight to your calls. 0344 499 1000 is the number to call. Let's go to Alan, who's in Salford and wants to join us to talk about the brilliant success of the British economy. Good morning to you, Alan.
Wow.
I mean, we laugh.
You're not kidding. So Rachel's come back, with a cap in hand from China with 600 million. I thought it was 600 billion she was bringing back. No.
Well, but China's a very small economy in a small country, so 600 million is a lot from China.
But they're so inept, this economics of these Labour governments. I've seen them for years. But 600 billion coming back. They give the Chagos Islands away. Yeah. And now we've got to release it back from them for £800 million a year. Yeah, that's it.
Well, 90 million. No, let's not exagerate. 90 million a year.
Well, even 90, any sort of
I know.
To release back what you it was part of your country. Also, 6 billion for the Great British Energy, which makes nothing, does nothing.
Yep.
All
It's got a lovely logo, though. Alan, you're being very negative. Frankly, it's negative people like you that are talking the country down, Alan.
Oh, no. But, Julia, they give 6 billion, they give hundreds of millions to people across the world for net zero. This net zero wants scrapping completely.
Yep. But that said, we've had 14 years of the Tories doing this. So, I mean, I knew they'd make it worse. Anything involved with Ed Miliband is going to be made worse. But, I mean, the Tories could have scrapped all this. They didn't. And now they're talking a vague game about this, but not that strong.
The Tories were the same, exactly. But they got it in the end, just before this lot got in power. And I blame the British people for putting these people in. I didn't vote for them.
What, Labour in? Well, the main thing was that, the main thing is, they barely got any more votes than they got in 2019 when they didn't get in. Most thing is it's people not voting for the Tory government. But I think a lot of people took the same view I did. They didn't deserve to get back in. I've been of the view that maybe the British people and the Labour Party need a little dose of Labour being in government to realise what they're like. Well, what this lot under Starmer are like.
Julia, 4 years is too long. I'm afraid for this lot. They'll have this will cripple this country. This 4 years, I think it's another 40 years.
Do you think he's going to last? There's not really a mechanism to get rid of a Labour leader unless he decides to fall on his sword. Do you think Rachel Reeves is going to last as Chancellor?
No, I think she'll go. But who did they put in? You've got Lisa Tandy, is it? Nandy?
He's Nandy, yeah.
The toy shop name. But I'm afraid, she's going to give the BBC taxpayers' money now. Yeah. I've not paid a licence for over 5 years. I won't pay it. I don't watch it.
Yeah.
But why should the taxpayer pay for this?
Well, yeah, that's the especially given the incredibly biased report. We've seen it any time outside of election time when they're required by the law to be completely unbiased in terms of timing and who they speak to. But the coverage in the last week about the state of the economy and the cost of borrowing, if that had been the Tory government in, that would have led every news item ad infinitum for the entire week. Barely got a mention.
And also, they will not call Hamas a terrorist organisation. Yep. What is wrong with this BBC? It's shocking. They moved to Salford, from London, yep. And the place where it is on the Keys. Everything's gone up round them because they've all come there with they've only moved down here because it's cheaper.
Yeah. That was. But also, we'll pretend we're doing, diversity of views, and actually, it's just all the people from London moving there. Alan, I can feel your despondency. I really can. Thank you for your call. Let's go to Paul, who is in Devon. Paul, are you feeling upbeat?
No.
I'm doing my best, mate.
Yes, well, the subjects that you were going to be discussing this morning, and also listening partly to Mike Graham predecessor to, that it makes me think, or I would say this country is now a failed state. If you look at the state of our utilities, electricity, gas, water, as you've already said this morning, we nearly run out and went into blackouts. These are all hallmarks for a failed state. Yeah. Our health service has collapsed. Our education system is unrecognisable. We have no law and order. Knife crime has taken over the streets. Drug dealing is rife. You do not see police out on the streets unless they're coming around to investigate a hate crime, and then they'll be mob-handed and kick your front door in. Your MPs do not even bother to, should we say, wander around the constituencies asking questions. The thing is that we as a people now, should we say, we don't have anybody to lead us anymore. The grooming gang scandal, Starmer will not have a national inquiry because that will expose the Labour Party's connections to power and votes, which they sacrifice these young girls to get the Muslim bloc vote.
Yeah, is anything he said wrong so far? I'd go no. Doom and gloom. As you say, we're a failed state. Paul, I think we could do the next hour on all that listing of things, but I think, you're quite right on all of it. Paul, I really appreciate your call. Thank you very much indeed. If you want to try and be upbeat, do feel free to call We'll talk to a former Labour minister coming up in a few moments' time. Do get in touch. Love to hear your thoughts on both sort of the Treasury ordering cabinet ministers to be ruthless identifying public spending cuts. What ruthless cuts would you make? And also courting Chinese investment, whether that could leave Britain vulnerable to Beijing. It's a hostile nation state. Give us a call. 0344 499 1000 is the number to call. This is Talk.
I mean, I think there's a couple of strands there, Julia, just to unpick. I think the wider message from Wes Streeting is that we've got to be careful about language and the tone of the debate. There's absolutely a debate to be had about whether or not we need an inquiry and why we might need an inquiry. But the language, I think, around some of these whole issues, Elon Musk, the way that he described Jess Phillips, I think was frankly despicable.
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
The language that he used. And I think all of us have just got to be mindful of that, because if you start talking about other communities, minority communities, and link that to crime in a kind of generalised way, that can have quite serious repercussions. So it's not to say we can't have a debate and talk about it, but everyone's got to be mindful of language.
Yeah, but likewise, so must the Prime Minister and others when they say people are jumping on a far-right bandwagon when they actually are saying facts.
Absolutely, it goes always. Yeah. It goes absolutely always. Your other point about the inquiry, I think you've slightly confused two things there.
One of those was a smaller inquiry, wasn't it?
This was an inquiry by the police watchdog, the Independent Office for Police Conduct, a very wide-ranging inquiry into allegations of cover-up and misconduct by police following the Rotherham grooming scandal. And the suggestion is, well, all of the higher-up officers sort of escaped. They were told not to investigate that. I should say the IOPC has hit back very, very strongly against those allegations and has refuted it. So where the truth lies in that, I'm not in a position to be able to say.
But you're quite right. And as I said, I thought, no, hold on a minute, I'm confusing, because we've had some individual local inquiries. We've had that police investigation into themselves, effectively, an investigation into what the police are doing, and also that Alexis J investigation. But the main argument is, that we've never had a proper full-scale inquiry into what happened in grooming gangs. As I think Kemi Badenoch put it at PMQs last week, joining the dots of what's really going on, what's behind it, why wasn't it tackled, who was responsible, and, basically starting to, prosecute more of the perpetrators, but also tackling the people who enabled it, allowed it, turned a blind eye.
Look, there's an argument about having an inquiry to join the dots. Absolutely. My argument about this is, we still haven't implemented any of the recommendations from the 7-year, £200 million national inquiry into child sexual abuse. And if we start to implement those recommendations and we get to a point where we think, well, there's more work to be done here, there's more stuff that needs to be uncovered, then you might think about another inquiry. I really don't believe that having another inquiry now, paying armies of lawyers to sit around and take evidence, which will take 2 years, 3 years, 4 years.
We're told 7 years.
It's the right approach. I think there are two things we need to do. At speed, implement those recommendations. I think it's a shame that we're being forced to have this sort of debate about it now. It wasn't in the Labour manifesto. It should have been. That was a mistake.
Well, the Tories should have enacted it.
Make sure the police go after these people. They've got evidence. If necessary, put some of the money you might have been putting into a national inquiry to beefing up the task forces that go after the perpetrators of this abuse, because that is what will stop it. Fundamentally.
I've never understood why it would be so hard to get evidence against men, given that most of these girls are underage. I mean, they're committing a crime it's immediately statutory rape at that point. I mean, Jesus, just give the girls filming devices, for the love of God. They know the houses where this is happening. I mean, the parents, the children themselves identifying where this is happening. Someone go in and put filming devices in. I genuinely don't think it's beyond the wit of man. Where there's a will, there's a way. I have definitely come around to the idea that there does need to be a public inquiry. I think we need to reset how we do public inquiries in this country. Again, the COVID inquiry, absolute waste of time. They're going to be looking into vaccines as of Wednesday. I don't think they're going to get remotely to the bottom of anything. I think it's an absolute waste of time. They're not looking into the real issues. They're still talking, should we have locked down sooner, seems to be the major issue. And, someone wrote a rude WhatsApp to Matt Hancock or Boris Johnson. We need to have, they need to be tight time constraints. We need to just speed these whole processes up. But I don't think an inquiry should stop police investigating crimes that have happened previously and are ongoing now. I don't understand remotely why we should allow that to happen. But look, let's move on, because we've also got Labour MPs now, one by one, breaking ranks. They're getting pressure from their mailbags and their constituencies saying, I do want a public inquiry. Andy Burnham, Manchester Mayor, he said at the end of last week that was something he'd be looking at. There is more and more pressure. We saw the government softening slightly. Keir Starmer went from last Monday talking about, right-wing bandwagons, and softened even by PMQs. Do you think we will end up getting some sort of national public inquiry, where there is, for instance, evidence given under oath, etc.?
I think it's possible. I mean, certainly there are a number of Labour MPs, and the intervention from Andy Burnham was clearly significant. I think it depends how big it is in the news, in a sense.
Yeah.
And whether we move on to debate other things and look at other things. I do remember, though, back when Theresa May was Home Secretary, and there was huge calls for a public inquiry into the Westminster paedophile ring.
Yeah.
And that sort of gathered momentum. And first of all, the government resisted it, and then they were forced to call a whole national inquiry into, which ended up being the independent inquiry into child sexual abuse that took 7 years. So that, there is a slight sense of deja vu here, where the government resists at the beginning and then has to cave into the pressure. I just think it depends, Julia, on the momentum and whether we just move on to other debates.
And Elon Musk moves on to something else. Well, we're all going to be talking about the California fires, talking about the economy, talking about Trump's inauguration a week today. I think things will move on, but I think there's an awful lot of people who are now insisting this does change. Just finally, want to ask you about rather embarrassing for the Labour government at this time that a former Labour MP, Ivor Kaplan, he's a former Labour minister, former MP for Hove, was arrested, released on bail, accused of engaging in sexual communication with a child, caught in a sort of a sting operation by of a group of activists on Saturday. Claimed they'd arranged to meet him posing as a 15-year-old boy. Obviously, he has been he's been arrested. He's been bailed, released from police custody. This obviously is a live case. We can't discuss rights and wrongs and things that we don't want to in any way impact if there is any future court procedure, but pretty embarrassing for the government, given that the likes of Keir Starmer and others in government all still follow this man on social media, and his social media is, frankly, full of quite extraordinarily explicit pornographic images of men. As a former Labour MP, not that is illegal, as opposed to the allegation against him, which no doubt he has denied, but it's an embarrassment for the government in the middle of this to have this arrest. No, certainly, isn't it?
Well, of course, I suppose it's embarrassing. I don't know all the details about this case, and I don't want to comment on this case. But
barely made the papers, interestingly.
Yeah, but I think the difficulty is when you get into government, when you have, is it 400 MPs, you have people with connections, the scrutiny is intense. It is so completely different from when you're in opposition, and every single individual, their social media contacts and everything else are scrutinized. The light is sort of unrelenting, and I think that's what the government is discovering, in that every single area in policy, the people they pick, their background, their dealings, their financial dealings. We know about Tulip Sadiq as well. It's unrelenting, Julia, the focus. It's already cost, the Transport Secretary her job. When she was in opposition, I'm sure that kind of scrutiny and focus wasn't there. She was Shadow Transport Secretary. Suddenly, when you've got power, you're in government, everyone is after you, everyone is looking at you, and I think that's what this government is discovering.
But it's quite interesting, people asking difficult questions for a change. Really good to talk to you. Thank you very much indeed. That's Danny Shaw, appreciate that. Just a quick word from Claire Pearsall.
It's always amazing that the high level of scrutiny comes as a surprise. To anybody.
Should have been more scrutiny of Labour before.
There should have been. There should have been, and we were all
maybe some questioning of their policies and how they added up.
Yeah, we were a bit slack on it, but they have done this exact same thing to the Conservative Party over 14 years, and they don't think it applies to them.
No, exactly. But there we are. 10:47 is the time. Up next, we'll talk to you at Labour peer, former Justice Secretary Lord Charlie Faulkner, about all of these big topics. This is Talk, Home of Common Sense.
the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
This is Talk. Welcome to the Home of Common Sense. I'm Julia Hartley-Brewer. Delighted to say Lord Charlie Faulkner joins us now. Labour peer, former Justice Secretary. Very good morning to you.
Good morning to you, Julia.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for inviting me to the Home of Common Sense.
We haven't got time for too many niceties because we're running a little bit late, so let's get straight to it.
Is nastiness about to come then, Julia?
Never with you, Charlie, never. How bad is the economy and what sort of ruthless spending cuts do we need?
Well, I think that the issue about the economy is the extent to which gilt yields will go up. I think it's really important that the government stick by its position, and its position is, and it's the right position, sort out the public finances and do everything you can in structural changes like planning reform in order to get growth. And that's the right course. And we've got to be as strong as we possibly can and consistent.
But she's talking about spending cuts.
Can I just do? I think if the position is that in order to stay within our fiscal rules, some spending cuts are required more than had previously been thought, then that's the way it's going to have to be.
But hold on a minute. When David Cameron and George Osborne instigated a load of spending cuts when the economy was in the doldrums when they took over in 2010, Labour said, no, you can't cut your way out of these problems. You have to spend your way. But now she's saying, no, it's all about cuts, apparently.
We have got to provide a consistent economic policy, and we were absolutely clear at the time we took over that we'd stick with the fiscal rules. She can't break the fiscal rules, and she's making that clear. I don't think there is a legitimate basis for criticism along the lines that you're suggesting, Julia.
But it's austerity. No, she's going to follow
Julia.
Austerity, even though she criticised the Tories for doing the same thing when they said we're just trying to balance the books. She wants to balance the books. I support balancing the books, but she and Labour and you criticised the Tory party for doing that when they did it. But it's okay when you do it.
I'm not quite sure what you're suggesting. Are you suggesting that she breaks her fiscal rules?
No, I'm asking why it's okay when Labour does it, but it's not okay when the Tories do it.
I don't think that's a fair analysis of what went before.
Is it completely different?
I think most people would think that the austerity imposed by Osborne and Cameron at the particular time was wrong because it led to a much more stagnating economy. The consequence of that has been that we've now got to take other measures. So I don't think it's a useful or accurate way of dealing with the economy.
A lot of economists and business leaders might beg to differ. We've got a massive lack of business confidence. We've got big concerns about inflation going up, about job losses, about wages not being able to keep track because there's extra national insurance costs imposed by Rachel Reeves and her head of the budget, or in the budget. I mean, at the end of the day, you know, it's all down to growth and confidence and productivity. There's not any evidence that anything that the Chancellor has announced so far is leading to those things.
You are right, Julia, where you say that business is saying the employer's national insurance increase, the increase the living wage, is leading to them being under greater pressure. The government had a difficult choice to make to start with, which is get the public finances right, which they are doing. The way that we're going to get growth is not through fiscal measures. The way we're going to get growth is through structural changes like the planning changes, like building more houses, like retrofitting a huge number of buildings for the green future.
It's the number one priority for the population, Charlie.
But Julia, you are not focusing on the problem that the economy faces, which is years of a lack of investment and years of a reduction in productivity. What you are focusing on is the fact that the gilt markets, quite understandably, are focusing very heavily on what's going to happen to the world economy in the light of what might be inflationary pressures from Trump.
Charlie, a lot of this is happening in other countries, but not to the same extent. We are being hit harder because there's a less confidence. You talked about productivity, falling productivity. That's only in the public sector. Private sector productivity has gone up. Public sector productivity has flatlined.
And that includes... Sorry, I apologise for interrupting, Julia. Go on with your point.
Public sector productivity that has flatlined, and your government has just given a massive big pay rise to a bunch, certainly a big pay rise, to a bunch of public sector workers without requiring any change to productivity levels.
you are completely wrong when you say that the only reduction in productivity is in the public sector. Indeed, one of the problems about the country is if you compare some private sector productivity with other countries, we're not as good. In relation to the pay rises, they will have the effect in very many cases of ensuring that productivity does go up in the public sector.
How?
But there's a huge way to go in relation to that.
I mean, I'm not sure paying train drivers more is going to make them any more productive. We've just seen, certainly on the Avanti West Coast line, they're working few days because they've now got enough money. They don't need to work at weekends at all. How are we going to improve growth in this country? I mean, we laugh, but that's the truth thing. How are we going to improve growth in this country and tackle these issues if we've got some of the highest energy costs in the world? Our energy costs for business are 5 times that of those in businesses in America. For homes, 3 times as much. How on earth are we going to, say, boost our economy with AI, which, by the way, uses huge amounts of electricity, when our electricity and other energy costs are so sky high because of a reliance and a push for even further reliance on net zero renewable technology?
Well, there's a whole range of things that need to be done. I think we need to, for example, expand nuclear. I think, for example, we need to make sure that renewables over time, and they will over time, cheapen the cost of energy. They need to be continuing to be invested in. I agree that the transition needs to focus as much as possible on both fairness and ensuring the costs are kept down. But it's a long-term process.
No, it's not. You've got 2030. No, Charlie, 2030 is 5 years away.
Yeah, that's right.
That's not long term.
What are you saying, Julia? We should stop trying to improve. We should stop.
I'm saying you should drop all net zero targets.
I don't know what you are suggesting.
No,
Julia.
I'm telling you what I'm suggesting. Drop all net zero targets. Certainly anything involving 2030.
Oh right, and so
including 2050. I drop all of it.
Okay. I disagree with that approach, Julia. I think that is completely mad. I think you are the shortest termist person, and the idea that you are operating from a home of common sense seems to be for the bird.
No, I'm not short term. I believe long term. Short term is thinking that you can actually have net zero fossil fuel free electricity in this country. Oh, sorry, was it down to 95% now in the latest pledge by 2030? When anyone who knows anything about the energy needs of this country knows that we're going to be using gas and nuclear and oil for many, many, many decades to come. I'm long term. I criticise the Tories just as much for this policy as well.
I understand your solution to be ditch all your net zero targets. Well, I'm not against that.
The solution is to have cheap, available, reliable, affordable energy. That's how you boost the economy. There has never been an economy in the world that has boosted its growth with high energy costs. We have some of the highest energy costs in the world. So how do you think that's going to deliver growth? Given that, that's because of net zero.
I think we need to balance the transition with sticking to our net zero targets and introducing things like nuclear. I think your statement, no economy has ever gone into growth with high energy costs. I don't quite know what that means, because I don't know what you thought happened in the 1980s and what the cost of energy then was.
Not as much as it is now, that's for sure. Fine, we've only got a minute left. I want to ask you, Tulip Siddiq, does she still have a job at the end of this month, or indeed at the end of this week? And should she?
It's for Sir Laurie Magnus to produce his report, and the right process is being followed.
What do you think? You're a former Justice Secretary. Do you think it's a good idea to have an anti-corruption minister in the Treasury who's being accused of corruption?
I'm not going to second-guess what Laurie Magnus says.
You don't have any views? She was owning a property that was gifted to her by a man being investigated for corruption who's close to her aunt, who's also being investigated for corruption as a former Bangladeshi PM. And you have no view on that?
I have a view that Sir Laurie Magnus is likely to know a lot more about it than I do.
But on what you know about it?
No, I'm not going to give a half-baked answer, Julia. Sorry. The home of common sense would not expect it, Julia.
Oh, we would. Lord Charlie Faulkner, we'll have to leave it there. As you can hear, time is against us. Great to have you join us. I'm going to hear from Claire on that in just a couple of moments. This is Talk, the home of common sense.
across the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
A very good morning. Welcome back to the show. Thank you very much indeed for joining me. This is Talk, the home of common sense, with me, Julia Hartley-Brewer. Apparently, not enough common sense for me, according to Charlie Faulkner, but fascinating. I can't wait to hear from Claire Pearson, who's a former Conservative government advisor, about that. I'm very fond of it. Again, I think one can disagree fundamentally with somebody forever on everything. And although I'm sure there are things that Charlie and I agree on, and then still have a perfectly pleasant conversation and meet for a pint afterwards. I don't see any reason why people find that difficult as a concept. But you know, he was wrong about everything. Hi, Charlie, if you're listening. We're going to talk about that. Plus, also, of course, if you're listening on DAB Plus radio or on your smart speaker, watching on YouTube or your connected device, it's great to have you on board. Also great to hear from you if you want to get in touch. Two questions I'm putting to you today. One is about the Treasury ordering cabinet ministers to be ruthless in identifying public spending cuts ahead of the spending review this spring. Yeah, didn't know much about that, did we? But we know a lot about it now because government debt costs have soared. Apparently not an issue. It's not a concern. Well, it is. It is. We're spending an extra £10 to £12 billion a year now servicing our debt, paying more on our debt now than Greece pays on their debt. Hello, Greece is a basket case, was forever, is now, will be forever probably. We're supposed to be a thriving first world country. We've got the grown-ups in charge, guys. Everything's supposed to be fine now. So why isn't it? Well, apparently the answer, though, is both AI, according to the Prime Minister, but also Chinese investment. Labour have been courting Chinese investment. We saw Rachel Reeves, the Chancellor, she's been off in China, basically for its net zero drive. But there are warnings that this could leave Britain vulnerable to Beijing. I mean, it's a hostile nation state run by a murderous, tyrannical, slave-driving country. I mean, I'm sorry. On what planet do we think this should be an important economic partner for our country? I want to know your reaction towards that. Whatever you want to talk to us about, whether it's about these ruthless spending cuts, because I would love to know, what ruthless spending cuts would you like to see? Because I've got a funny feeling that you and I could come up with some great spending cuts that would actually save money and would boost the economy. I'm just not sure Labour are going to make the right ones. I would love to hear from you. Give us a call, 0344 499 1000. Text the word TALK and your message to 87222. Get in touch on X at Talk TV. Don't forget that calls are charged at the national rate. Text cost £1, standard network rate message. We're also going to be talking about damning new figures that revealed that the NHS left a record 500,000 hospital patients lying on trolleys in A&E for at least 12 hours last year. One of my own family members in 2023 spent more than 24 hours on an A&E trolley in a corridor. And he's 6'5" and he had a broken pelvis. I can't think of anything less copeable with than that. Also, it's emerged related to the NHS that paramedics in England are unable to respond to 100,000 urgent 999 calls, not those nutty ones like, oh, I'm feeling a bit faint. No, don't call 999 for that. Urgent 999 calls every month, not once, not in the year, every month, because they are stuck sitting outside hospitals for hours on end in those ambulance bays waiting to hand over patients to A&E staff. Plus, we're going to be talking about internet safety. I'm not so keen on governments now trying to tell us to make our lives a bit safer through technology. Technology Secretary Peter Kyle says UK laws on internet safety are very uneven and unsatisfactory. This is following calls from campaigners to tighten the rules. We often have this particularly from the parents of children or teenagers who've faced issues online. But will the new law just lead to more censorship of free speech? I think we all know the answer to that. Claire Pearson, so much to talk about. Before we get into any of that, just some breaking news. Nicola Sturgeon has ended her marriage to the former SNP chief executive Peter Murrell. They've decided to end their marriage, she said in a post on social media. Of course, both of them have both been investigated by police. Ongoing. Again, if you thought the police were bad at investigating grooming gangs, goodness me, they're very slow investigating claims of misuse of campaign funding by the donated funding for the SNP. Police questioned both Peter Murrell and his wife Nicola Sturgeon and others about this issue, but they're ending their marriage. Are we surprised?
No, I don't think so, but who's going to get custody of the camper van that was in the middle of all of this? I think these are the important issues that we need to address.
I mean, he was parked on his... It was the mother-in-law.
Yeah.
So Sturgeon's mum
he's
had
got more
ownership, 9/10 of the law, surely.
Exactly. So
who wants the camper van?
Well, I can't imagine.
I can't. I've got to be honest with you. I know lots of people do this. I'm just like...
People enjoy it.
I know. No, I've got, I mean, my in-laws, they'll go and do this. My idea of hell.
Yeah, mine too.
But, everyone's got a different... But anyway. What did you make of what Charlie Faulkner, former cabinet minister, very well connected with the current Labour government? He's, they're very Blairite. He was a very staunch Labour Blairite minister. We're told that the cabinet being told public spending cuts must be ruthless, the debt costs are soaring. A lot of this is about boosting productivity. It's about using AI. It's about net zero. When I put it to him about our energy costs, with all due respect. They're living in cloud cuckoo land, aren't they?
They are. They've set their stall out by net zero and this want of achieving it. And his answer were, we need to get growth, build more homes and retrofit stock so that it's green.
Build more homes. That involves concrete. How do you make concrete?
Yeah, that's the use of electricity and water.
Basic stuff.
It is, but the people to build it, you've got to find the land, you've got to put in all of the utilities. It's not a quick fix. And yes, we do need to build more homes. I don't think anybody disagrees with that.
That's the mantra of this show, build more homes.
Yeah, but it's not the answer to growth if you're going to harp on about net zero, which is only going to make us colder and poorer.
Do you think they're going to end up dropping a lot of their net zero targets? Or do you think they're just going to keep doubling down? I mean, Ed Miliband is again, he's got the same degree I've got. I think if you look at the numbers, you must know that this is an absolute load of utter tripe and codswallop.
But he's swallowed it, hasn't he? The Kool-Aid on this. He is...
You know what, though? You get a great job. Whenever you leave these, you get a fantastic... You get involved in this green. There is so much money in green eco world. He'll go on to some job on the world stage,
What, the world windmill stage? Or
but there's money in them. There are windmill hills that are being ruined by those wind turbines. But they are totally doubling down on this. Yeah. They must know. They're dropping various targets like banning gas boilers. I mean, again, I would genuinely. That's the point. I would have bought a gun. No, I'm serious. I would have protected my right to have a gas central heating till the end of time. I feel the cold. I'm a southern softie. It's not my fault. But the net zero push, they're basically handing power to Beijing. That is one of the concerns. Yes. They were going to hand power to Beijing, like allowing Huawei, a Chinese firm, completely and utterly in cahoots with the Chinese government to handing off 5G network. Let the Chinese build some nuclear power stations. Oh, what could possibly go wrong? I mean, I do sometimes worry that the people in charge of our country, whether Tories or Labour over the last 20 years, they're either very, very stupid, and the pieces of paper they've got from top universities and their jobs previously suggest they're not stupid, or they are genuinely, completely and utterly bought and paid for by our Chinese enemies. Because there is no other explanation why anyone sane would allow this.
No, you are going to be dependent on Beijing till the end of time if you take all of the technology from them. And the national security implications, because even with the solar panels, if we fall out with China at any point over anything at all, they can reprogram bits of solar panels that can disrupt our supply. So why has no one looked at that seriously enough?
But also at any point they can simply say, oh, we're stopping production, we're stopping supply of this or that. Given that many experts are predicting battles over Taiwan in the future, well, are we siding with Taiwan or not? Are we just going to go, but we get our solar panels from China, so sod the people of Taiwan? I mean, I'm sorry, it's just at some point, is anyone going to wake up to this? I just find it utterly extraordinary, I really do. I mean, in terms of spending cuts, public spending cuts must be ruthless, we're told, in a letter from the Treasury to every spending department. Again, as I put to, the former Justice Secretary for Labour, I mean, they criticised George Osborne and David Cameron, even though, by the way, they initiated their austerity after an economic crisis under Labour, again, a world crisis, but a world crisis made worse here because of deregulation of banks here and America, pushed by Gordon Brown, the then previous Chancellor, then Prime Minister. They then instigated this austerity, those cuts. Labour were completely against it, so this was completely wrong. But actually, the Labour government, the Tories were in a coalition government in 2015. In 2015, while those cuts were massively hitting the public sector, really damaging a lot of aspects, education, tackling crime, the NHS, they were re-elected with a majority. for David Cameron. The public were happy with that decision. That's the reality. Given a choice between the Labour leader then, Mr. Ed Miliband, with his Edstone and things. So they were given a thumbs up by the British people at that point. I mean, but spending cuts now, you can't have spending cuts and also make criminal justice work better, boost our education, deliver quicker. You cut the waiting list in NHS. You can't do any of the things they've said they want to do.
And that's the problem. The promises that they've made in their manifesto, they keep saying that they're going to fix the problem with teacher recruitment. So you're going to have an extra 6,000 teachers. Well, that's got to be paid. Where's that coming from? The rise in VAT on school fees, which isn't going to bring in that. It's actually going to cost more. So you wonder where they're going to get the 90 million a year to pay off
and that's just one.
That's just
one thing.
That's just one thing. And how are you going to get the public services up and running? Buses, trains, planes, if you want some. How are you going to do that without any investment?
I don't think we're supposed to be travelling. I think that's part of the whole net zero futures. We all just sit at home in our little hovels, with the hot water bottles on. I don't know how we heated the water for the hot water bottles because we haven't got electricity, because we're having blackouts. But genuinely, it's one of our callers, Paul, just says we're a failed state right now. I'm really beginning to feel that. Did we need to have this little wake up? I mean, you lot, you didn't deserve to stay in government. You really didn't. A lot of people knew if they stayed home or they voted Reform, they weren't going to get a Reform government if that's what they wanted, or if they voted Lib Dem, they weren't going to get a Lib Dem, they were going to get a Labour government. That's what everyone knew was on the cards. I remember saying to some prominent late Tory MPs who still come on the show, well, you know what? If so be it. I mean, you have to be punished for being as bad as you've been on issues like net zero, on other things, on public services and tax and things like that. And I remember two household name Tory MPs said to me, yeah, but, careful what you wish for, because in 97 that happened, and then we had Labour for 10 years. Like, well, yeah, because, you deserve to be out of power. And if that's the deal, I worry now whether this country's economy is going to survive even 4.5 more years of this.
And it's quite interesting. A lot of young people who decided to vote Labour to give them a chance because we were so awful in some areas have never lived under a Labour government, so they hadn't seen it. Whereas the rest of us were sort of going, well, hang on a minute, let's have a look at this because it's not going to be as great as you think.
Yeah.
They didn't know. They didn't understand what the consequences were. So I do think a lot of people are waking up to what a socialist government is.
Well, again, he's very open. He says he's a socialist. I mean, there could have been a lot of sensible things that they were going to do. I'm not party, but I have never been a member of a political party. I've voted for many different parties. I've voted for Labour over the years in the past as well. I don't have an instant, I just happen to think that Keir Starmer is just psychologically unable to be a good Prime Minister. I think Rachel from Accounts is utterly useless. Yvette Cooper thinks we should have open borders. I mean, you go down the list of these people, they were never going to be any good. But is the answer spending cuts? Given where we are?
No, I don't think it is. You can't cut your way out of
What are the other options, though? Tax rises?
Well, I'm afraid it's going to have to be, and that's where Labour...
This country can't take any more tax rises.
No, but this is where Labour have put themselves into a complete corner because they promised in their manifesto that they weren't going to raise any of those three main taxes. Well, you should never promise that because you don't know what's coming down the line.
There's tax benefits.
Yes.
The only way you're going to get this country, you have to basically, you can't have massive more workers' rights, like you can work from home and you can work a 2-day week if you want. You've got that nonsense all got to go because people aren't going to employ. You can't have a national insurance rise, the tax on jobs. You also, when there were some reports over the weekend and today about the huge number, I think it's 9 out of 10 disability benefit assessments now are made online by people working online and people sitting at home. I mean, how easy is that to defraud? I mean, what a shocker. I mean, someone could always walk in with a limp, couldn't they? I mean, for goodness sake. But let's have some sort of reality check when you're talking about people being given, 10+ grand a year of taxpayers' money. And also then not contributing when they're not working. We are going to have to, we are just absolutely going to have to get to grips with the number of people who aren't working.
We are, and it was a very uncomfortable moment. I agreed with something that Tony Blair said this morning, that, and it's very uncomfortable, but we need to stop self-diagnosing with depression and mental health problems.
Tony Blair's right
you've got
on
a
that.
point on this.
Although he'd want everyone to have some sort of form of ID card to say whether they were or weren't.
Yeah, I don't agree with him on anything else.
No, but he just... Can I just say, if you're watching, you just saw me sort of flinch. I was just being handed a piece of paper. Just Stop Oil protesters. That lot. Happy New Year, everyone. They're back. I bloody hate these people, and they are getting worse and worse. They have just spray-painted Charles Darwin's grave at Westminster Abbey, and then they're sitting there cross-legged with their Just Stop Oil. But they're middle-aged older men who, frankly, should know... Oh, my God, they're 66 and 77. Alison, who's a man, Lee, and Di Bly covered the memorial using orange paint with a message that said 1.5 is dead this morning. This is basically about this key global warming threshold of 1.5 Celsius above pre-industrial temperature. A load of, again, random round number, picked, roundish number, picked from random. And now they've spray-painted a grave. Sacrilegious anyway.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, you don't damage graves, OK? That makes you a yob, OK? Putting a political message on a grave of someone, by the way, who has been so important in scientific discovery, the theory of evolution, basic stuff that really is at the heart of everything. I mean, these people have got to be stopped. I'm sorry. I you believe in freedom of speech? Yeah, that's not speech. That's graffiti. Vandalism. I mean, I'm sorry.
They need arresting. They really do. But I'm sorry.
They really do need the book thrown at them. I mean, very, very hard, and I'm happy to do it. I feel an absurd level of vitriol towards these people.
I now appreciate why your face was such...
I just suddenly grimaced when I saw it.
And it is.
And we've got the picture up if you're watching on YouTube or on a connected device. You can see the picture. I mean, also, it's the people standing around watching it. I'm sorry. I would have dive-bombed onto these people and wrestled them. I mean, I don't care. And I know it's only property. I get it's property, not people. I get that. But it's just so unacceptable.
What gives them the right to go and deface something?
How bloody dare you deface a grave of anyone? Of anyone.
Yeah. I'd be pulling them off, just yanking their arm and sort of dragging them away.
Tell you what, next time, lads, you went into Westminster. Next time, lads, why don't you go into a mosque and try that? Let's see how that works out for you, yeah? When you're in hiding for the next 20 years. But, you do that. Go on. Why don't you, why don't you deface a cartoon of the Prophet Muhammad and see what happens to you then? Because I think you'll find then the book will be thrown at you, but it won't by the authorities. Seriously, it's got to stop. It has got to stop. Of course, the judges all agree with them because they're all woke now as well. 11:20 is the time. The Prime Minister has just started... he's rolled his sleeves up again. Oh, it's always worried. Whenever the Prime Minister rolls his sleeves up to give a speech, it's cold out there, mate. Oh, have you got the heating on? Oh, is it central heating? Oh, the stuff you don't approve of? I hope it was a heat pump, Prime Minister. Why is it warm in that room? He's got a load of people who are going to try and look interested and not pick their noses standing behind him. He's going to give a speech about AI because that's the future. Even though AI involves huge amounts of electricity, which we can't even rely on a cold day in January because we're no longer a serious country. And as a caller Paul pointed out the other day, we're now a failed nation state. Happy New Year, everybody. Happy Monday. Claire Pearsall staying with us. Up next, we are going to talk about, the NHS in crisis with Jamie Jenkins, former head of health analysis at the Oxford National Statistics. Stay tuned. We're going to try and change cheery, but I mean, I'm off to Westminster Abbey to sort these lads out. This is Talk the Home of Common Sense. exciting opportunities at our Leeds office today. Now, if you're looking for someone to be the cleaner or work in the canteen, that's fine, isn't it? Right, you don't need to have a finance background. Otherwise, if you want to do a job at the Bank of England, I'm thinking finance might be a useful background.
I mean, they're just going to let anybody in. Doesn't really matter. Come on, give it a go.
What on earth is going on in this country? This is the sort of thing that led to failure to deal with the California fires when you have a load of diversity, equity and inclusion hires at your fire department and your mayor and things, and so you don't actually fill up reservoirs and don't have firefighting equipment. I mean, the world has gone utterly mad. I mean, we're going to have to hit rock bottom before... This is like this country and America saying, on heroin, going to have to hit rock bottom before we have a wake up and go, oh, look what's happened. But there we are. Anyway, maybe that's where we are in terms of the NHS. Let's talk about where we are with the NHS with Jamie Jenkins, former Head of Health Analysis at the Office for National Statistics. A very good morning to you, Jamie. Cheer us all up.
Yeah, good morning, Julia. Well, I knew I was coming on to talk about this this story today, but I suppose that the big question is this news? Because a quick kind of look on a search engine, in the year 2000, there was news stories about people dying because of ambulance delays trying to get at people, and so that's 25 years ago.
And it's been going on forever. Well, look, let me just update people on what we're talking about. So there's two really big stories today. 500,000, over 500,000 people last year in NHS hospitals turned up to A&E, were put on a trolley. They weren't just sitting in the waiting room. They needed to be treated. They needed to be admitted. They were left on a trolley for more than 12 hours, more than 500,000 people. It's not one-offs. It's happening routinely. Also, ambulance crews stuck outside A&E in those ambulance bays with somebody who needed to go to hospital, who called 999 in the ambulance, missed thousands of 999 calls every single day. Why? Because they were stuck there. I mean, we are talking about an abject failure. We know, was at the latest stats, 24,000 people are estimated to have died in the last year because they could not get treated quick enough at A&E. You think it's been happening for years, but is it getting worse?
Yeah, well, the big issue you've got, Julia, is that if you take, say, the last 25 years, and this has been going on for a long, long time, there's a couple of things that have been going on. We've reduced the number of hospital beds in the hospitals overall, and part of that is because they've moved some of the care that, say, in the 1980s, 90s, where you would have just looked after kind of frail old people in hospital. They've moved them kind of more out towards care in the community, which is fine. But I think possibly they've gone a bit too far because they've reduced the number of beds. But remember, what's also happening in the population is we've got lots of people who, especially were born after the Second World War, the baby boomers, are in that kind of age of 75, 80, where we know demand on the NHS goes up as you get older. So we've got a lot more older people, fewer beds. So what happens is, exactly to what you've talked about, is we haven't planned properly for, not just this government, they haven't been in long, but the previous government, the Tony Blair government, and before that, we have not planned for this properly. So what are you going and what you're seeing?
Can I say, by the way, because you couldn't possibly predict that a massive big bulge in the population of older people, of people who are middle-aged, for instance, would at some point reach 75, 80, 85. You couldn't possibly predict that because age just is completely random, isn't it? It doesn't work on that linear basis.
Oh, and that's where it's all shocking, really, isn't it, Julia? Because this is easily something that you should be planning for. You look at the data and you can see we're probably going to need to increase the number of beds.
Yeah, it's like schools. Oh, look, a load of kids have been born this year. In 4.5 years' time, we're going to need another place for them. I mean,
it's basic policy making, Julia, and that's what's lacking. So what you've got now is, because you haven't got those beds in the hospitals, so basically what's happening is an ambulance turns up. They can't get into the A&E department because there's not enough beds in the A&E department, because some people are in the A&E department need to go into the more the general wards in the hospital because they've seen the consultant in the A&E and they say, right, we need to admit you. Oh, we can't yet because there's not enough beds. And we've got some people in those beds waiting to go out of hospital, but they haven't got the care in the community to go out as well. So these delayed discharges mean that you get a backfill all the way up through the system. So the ambulance is outside the hospital. Your loved one maybe has a serious stroke, a heart attack. You phone for an ambulance. They can't get there in time because a lot of them are just sat outside the hospital. So what that causes then is people to die. And
it's
these
that
are
simple.
Things that should not be these should not be happening when you could have planned for this. You can't do it overnight. If they don't do something today to say fix this in 2040, this is just going to be a problem that goes on year after year after year.
Well, we're told, AI is part of the answer, tech firms getting involved and dealing with things. I'm sure, again, we know how much technology has, well, I mean, it's massively improved our health over the years, MRI scanners and things like that, but also, of course, it poses massive extra costs as well because there's more technology that to be used. But do you think AI, and we're told today by the Prime Minister, AI is about boosting productivity, boosting this, is going to help with schools, it's going to help with hospitals, AI companies going to get access to all our NHS records, apparently. I mean, is that the answer?
Well, AI will help reduce the waiting times and probably get some earlier diagnosis in the system. But it's not going to stop people in the future having heart attacks, having strokes, having serious issues that when they try and get that ambulance and try and get into the the A&E department for their emergency care, if there's not enough beds with the population growing as we've talked about, AI isn't going to fix that. That's what the NHS is there to do, is to try and save lives. Now, it might improve lives in terms of the diagnosis for the more day-to-day kind of care that the NHS provides, but the emergency care that we're talking about, where you turn up, you need that life-saving treatment, AI is not going to be really touching the surface on that, I don't think.
It's fundamentally, it's going to be about people, isn't it? I mean, I also want to ask you, I mean, we started talking to you when you were giving, fantastic analysis of the data during the COVID years, which a lot of people are trying to sort of forget, pretend it never happened. But most of the problems we've got right now have either been started or exacerbated by the decisions to lock down and all the spending that happened then. The COVID inquiry is ongoing. I mean, it'll go on forever, probably. Not that I'm waiting for its report, because I'm not sure it's looking into any of the real sensible questions. Everything's just, did someone write something nasty on WhatsApp about Boris Johnson, and should we have locked down sooner, which seems to be the only two things they're interested in. On Wednesday, they start Module 4. This is looking into vaccines. Now, lots of evidence has been uncovered about vaccines for COVID. I mean, we've had, vaccines taken off the market. There have been some vaccines for some other diseases, these mRNA vaccines, which have been taken off the market. Well, they haven't passed their trials because basically people who are taking these vaccines get sicker than those who don't have the vaccine, which suggests it's probably not a very good vaccine. We know that there was a lot of pushing for children to have vaccines, even though, the body that advises the government on these things said, no, these are not. There's no reason for children to have them there. Unless you're very, very sick, you're not at risk from COVID as a child, as we knew, by the way, in March 2020. But the public wasn't basically paying attention or being told that. We're now going to have this module into this. Do you think we're going to learn anything of use that is going to change policy?
Well, it depends on how thorough the COVID inquiry wants to be. And I think you've already hit the nail on the head in terms of the previous modules and looking at certain things. They're not really asking the real questions, I think. So on the vaccines, for example, there was a huge marketing push. A lot of people pushing the different vaccines. And at the time, I think I was on this station talking about kind of the vaccines among younger children, for example, and the fact that the data, they weren't really supporting the need to vaccinate every child, potentially certain groups of children potentially there, and they were kind of pushing it in that direction as well. So will we get the real answers? I think the one thing the COVID pandemic has done generally with vaccine coverage, which is I think they need to look into this as well, is kind of damaged confidence for all vaccines for people.
Which will cost lives.
Yeah, and that could cost lives. I know of people who had the COVID vaccines. They've been asked to go for COVID vaccines. Some are, some aren't. But some people are just generally questioning, why do I need to have a vaccine all the time? And the confidence has gone down a little bit. So the lesson perhaps needs to be learned in terms of the communication of who needs one, who doesn't need one, rather than this kind of one-size-fits-all.
And worrying about giving COVID vaccines to kids who were barely affected by COVID, and pushing it on perfectly healthy people like me who'd already had COVID. But let's not worry about making sure kids are getting MMR, which will quite literally save lives. And again, lack of confidence in those vaccines as well. And of course, and again, it's something pointed out by Molly Kingsley and others at Us For Them, fantastic campaigners for honesty on all of this, pushed out yesterday. It's showing that, is organisations like the British Medical Association, who pushed for children to get these vaccines, were in receipt of £500,000 of funding from a vaccine company, but didn't declare that interest, which is clearly, medically disreputable to not do so. And there are just so many people who were sort of, financially benefiting, or organisations financially benefiting from big pharma donations, who were pushing. It is. I mean, I've never been a conspiracy theorist, Jamie, but I really, really would like the COVID inquiry to actually look at some of these genuine issues, because they do have a massive impact on people's lives. Thank you so much for joining us, Jamie. Really appreciate that. He's a former head of health analysis at the Office for National Statistics. Claire, I do want you to come back on this, but I've also got... before that, I just want to make the point now. We're running a little bit late on Keir Starmer's speech. He's giving a speech in central London. We're not playing it because we like you too much, usual rules. Launching the government's AI action plan. I mean, there won't be an action plan. Setting out how to encourage investment and innovation in the sector. Ironically, the Wi-Fi connection at the venue went down. So they couldn't broadcast the speech. So now someone has just been, there are various people. Peter Kyle, the Technology Secretary, just started speaking, but they said it was all delayed because they lost their Wi-Fi connection. And they're talking about why. I mean, you couldn't make it up, could you, Claire? You couldn't.
No. He rolled his sleeves up, but then somebody's server went down.
I mean, to be fair, that may have been old footage. I hadn't realised, but, you know, it was said he was making a speech and he was on the telly, so, you know.
I mean, it's just the ultimate irony, isn't it? That's it. This is what he'll have to put up with.
We can't even get Wi-Fi to work. You can't get Wi-Fi, you can't get a train signal, a phone signal on a train.
No.
But yeah, AI, we're the future. Oh, give me a break. Do you think any of this is going to help at all in dealing with the NHS backlogs?
No, I don't, and I'm quite concerned that AI companies are going to have access to anonymised NHS data.
How anonymised, I'd like to know.
Well, that's it. That's what I'm concerned. What is it they're going to have access to? And how far back are they going? Is this for everybody? Is this only for specific
Have
people?
I given permission for this? I always offer my data for anything. I'm in bed giving labour in labour having given birth. And if you want to bring in 20 students to learn about how much a woman can swear whilst giving birth, that's fine. That's fine. I'm all happy with that. I feel very, very wary of the air night. No, Keir Starmer is speaking. No, it was old footage. He hasn't rolled his sleeves up. Today, he has got his tie on, he's got his shirt on, and he's even got a jacket on, which means he definitely means business. It's very, very serious. Let's hope the Wi-Fi holds. We'll let you know what he has to say if it's vaguely worth hearing a little bit later. We'll take a break now, 11:37. Up next, we're going to be talking about free speech, because once again, Labour are talking about big tech and new online laws, and it's all about our safety. I'm very wary of governments trying to protect me. I'm not sure they're protecting me very well. We're going to be talking about that with Claire Fox, the wonderful Baroness Fox, up next. This is Talk, the home of common sense. under Obama and Biden administrations in America in terms of censorship there and the censorship we've seen here of free speech over issues like trans issues, COVID and everything else in between. Should we be wanting any new online safety laws to make our children safer?
I'm afraid I don't think we do, but we've got it. I mean, the online safety bill that's now become an act was posed very much to the public as protecting children. And it's very hard to argue against that, isn't it? You kind of immediately think, I don't want children to be exposed to, extreme porn or...
I don't want to be exposed to it.
No, but, I understand the instinct of the general population thinking anything that will protect children is good with me. But the problem with that bill was that, only about 20% of it, if that, would affect children anyway. They just used this bill to bring on huge regulatory changes that would have an impact on the adult population, as you could imagine. And it always feels to me as though they rather cynically use the child protection point to actually assault adult rights. That's the first thing. Secondly, I think it's so ironic that we're having this conversation while this AI summit's going on. Because they say, we're going to have this big AI summit and attract all these big tech companies to come to this country. What? You're just introducing a piece of legislation that basically threatens any technology company that does not scour beforehand and bring out a whole range of policies that says that should any piece of information go on your site, and this can be very small hosting sites, by the way, for the most innocuous topics, through to the big, Facebook and X and so on, that could possibly be seen as illegal, then we are going to absolutely clamp down on you and fine you. So they're demanding that the online world, that the big tech, should remove things in case they might be seen as stirring up racial or religious hatred. Now, first of all, it's not clear in the law what stirring up hatred means. These are subjective terms. It's not as though you can say, well, if it's illegal, that's fine. And there was concern originally because they were saying that we should ban things that were legal but harmful, and that caused controversy. But actually, even saying they need to be ahead of the curve and remove anything that's illegal, it's not clear in speech terms, free speech terms, or any other kind of speech, what's legal, what's
and we had that during the lockdown, didn't we? People, again, we had our YouTube page. I've battered on about this last week. Had our YouTube page taken down for conversations with scientists and medical experts making reasonable points. Oh, by the way, all proven to be completely correct later on. People weren't allowed to say that this came from the Wuhan lab. It did. Anyone who doesn't think so, frankly, hasn't paid attention to the information.
Zuckerberg's, blown the cover off this now. I mean, when those of us who try to argue, look, that there is political interference in this, where governments all around the world, we now know, definitely in America, but it was happening in the UK, were basically saying, could you ensure that what gets out is government health information that's true versus disinformation that's not true? We now know that it was a very one-sided, often propagandist and often not factual version of events at that time. So, of course, the Labour government's come in, and what have they said about the Online Safety Act, which is already draconian and scary, how much power Ofcom are going to have to police what we as users see, say, but, see more importantly, because they will have already removed stuff. The Labour government has said it doesn't go far enough, and in fact have said it's too weak and a sticking plaster, and they're going to look at strengthening it by adding in disinformation and misinformation, the very things which Zuckerberg has really, revealed to us are just propagandist words.
Which he was happy to go along with when it was politically expedient. I don't believe for a moment that he's changed his tune on it. But this is the key thing. I mean, again, what is hateful? I mean, well, trans women are men. That would get you taken off any social media site until a couple of years ago. That's considered hateful by most of the Labour Party.
Well, Zuckerberg actually admitted that on issues around gender and sex and around issues around immigration, that it was just assumed that anyone who was posting on those issues was somebody that was creating harmful content, and Facebook removed it. Which meant that if you were to have, I don't know, typed in something like, I'm really worried that mass migration might be harmful for society, that would be, you'd be put in Facebook prison, effectively, right? So you already had that going on. And my only credit to him, it's not to turn him into the hero of the hour, is that he's basically just admitted what the rest of us already knew.
I don't give him a shred of credit. No, I don't give him a shred of credit. He's part of the problem. He's not part of the solution. It's all about making money, and I don't mind him doing that, but I'd rather he was just honest about it. But you go back to what you said about, again, everything is always shrouded in this idea of like, oh, well, it's all about protecting children. But you can't identify children unless you can also identify adults. Otherwise, children will just say they're adults. At which point, surely, we have to identify who we are. Now, a lot of people say, oh, well, you shouldn't be on social media if you've not identified who you are. Well, yeah, say that to people campaigning for, basic political rights in countries like China or elsewhere in the world. There is a reason why some people want to maintain their anonymity.
Anonymity is hugely important.
And whistleblowers, for instance, and the like. But I can't see how you can regulate anything for children unless you're able to identify that someone is a child. You can only do that by identifying everyone individually as an adult.
Well, there are clever people in tech who say that there are markers that can do that.
Yeah,
but otherwise, age verification is exactly as you say, which is it will break anonymity. And I think particularly in light of what we now know to be true around the grooming gangs and the rape gangs, which I know obviously we've all been discussing for a long time. What you need is anonymity for whistleblowing originally. You need people to be able to say, has this happened? I read a fascinating anonymous account from somebody who works in the health service about what has been going on in terms of not being able to talk about these issues in relation to the young girls, right? And he then went on to explain that he was anonymous because he'd lose his job.
Exactly.
And we know that that's so important. But the other thing about it is, and this is when you talk about children, what is so sickening is the government have come out and said, for the sake of protecting children from, for example, sexual molestation and grooming, are going to clamp down on the internet.
Yeah.
The same government that at the same time is saying, oh, no, we don't need to specifically look at what's happened in those northern towns in relation to online grooming. And it is the case that stirring up hatred of religion or ethnicity was exactly the excuse that was used to prevent people from investigating the largely Pakistani gangs that were physically, not online, but they're in the flesh, abusing those young women. So the double standards, the two-tier approach, as we keep saying, this is where you really get so infuriated, because I do not believe that this is going to help children.
No.
This online safety
The paedophiles always find a way round it. You know that, I know that. They just go to them. I mean, I don't even know what teenagers are communicating on. I know it's not WhatsApp. It's not. They're onto something. They're three different apps on from the rest of us. So they're not. Most MPs don't even know how X works, for God's sake.
No, it's a terrible challenge. I understand for parents, right? I mean, I do understand this. That if you're, a parent of a young person, you think, God, won't somebody come along and save my children from this? But the truth of the matter is that ultimately parents have to take some responsibility.
Yeah, absolutely.
For what their kids have access to. Somebody made the point when you wouldn't necessarily give them 50 quid and put them outside the betting shop and tell them to have a good time, right?
Yeah.
You wouldn't necessarily give them a load of money and stick them in the pub for a day, and if they were 13 or 12, right? So what you maybe have to think is, I might have to deal with the fact that my child has access to this.
Yeah, and take responsibility for it, absolutely. Claire Fox, always so good to talk to you. Baroness Fox, there, independent peer and director at the Academy of Ideas, somebody who's been campaigning on free speech so often. I'm so glad she's in don't approve the House of Lords, as I told her. A lot of people have been putting the House of Lords in recent years. Don't approve of it, but if we're going to have the House of Lords, I'm glad people like Claire Fox is in it. She got tutted at when she was talking about the grooming gangs issue the other day in the Lords. Tutted at. Quite extraordinary.
Yeah.
I mean, she's right, isn't it? Whenever anyone says now, we're going to try and protect children, I always say, okay, and how are you going to do that? And anyway, anyone who uses the term hate speech, I instantly go,
Yes.
well, that's a bad thing.
Yeah, absolutely. But what are they protecting the children from? Because, you know, these platforms that you and I use are not what teenage kids
really aren't.
and preteens are using. My child only uses WhatsApp to get hold of me.
Yes.
I'm the only person.
Yeah.
He doesn't use it for his friends. He said, why would we do that? It's for old people.
Is it Snapchat? I mean, one of the ones I don't know.
Yeah,
I don't know.
He's on that.
I have a teenager who tells me off for being on the phone. So, you know, there we are. I've got one of the sane ones. What can you do? Claire, thank you very much. We're going to take a couple of your calls. We're going to talk more about all of these topics. We're going to have a wonderful Lord David Frost. Lots of very eminent peers on the show today, aren't there? Coming up after 12. Do stay tuned. This is Talk the Home of Common Sense. We can't manage Wi-Fi. We can't manage phone signals in some streets in the capital city of this country. But, yeah, we're going to be at the future of AI. I mean, it's just embarrassing, isn't it? Let's talk to James. He's on the line in Staffordshire. He's given us a call on 0344 499 1000, as you can at any time. Very good morning to you, James. What do you want to say?
Good morning, Julia.
Good morning.
Couple of three minor, very quick comments, if I may.
Go for it.
Firstly, why are we bothering with China when Rolls-Royce have got oven-ready plans for small modular reactors that can be dropped into place? They're cheaper than the wind ones, as a colleague of yours says. Yeah. The interconnectors for copper. Somebody said there's not enough copper in the world if America went the same route as we are to connect all the stuff together.
Yeah. Absolutely. But I will say, there was a lot of talk from Labour. One of the few sensible things they said on energy policy was they would build nuclear power stations, but they'd build the small nuclear model reactors because they could be done quicker. That was something, but I haven't heard anything about that lately.
They've shelved the plans for another year. The other thing is that two things over the savings and the economy. Yep. I worked for the police for 20 years. I never spent my budget. I was an IT manager, never spent my budget. Got castigated every March for not spending my budget. Can you go out and buy 300 useless computers? Why don't they give out an award for people who don't spend the budget rather than having this ridiculous... You won't get it next year.
In every department, there's an incentive, and also you're more important because you've got a bigger budget. There's an incentive to spend more in the public sector, and indeed many areas of the private sector as well.
And then two other very quick points. Firstly, the police stopped recruiting from the army. They openly don't recruit from the army and don't recruit from the services, which I just find ridiculous. They'll have somebody with a policing degree. You can't teach somebody to run into a burning building with a policing degree. Yeah. Very quick last point. Yeah. Very easy way to turn the economy around. Drill, baby, drill. Cheap energy.
James, that's it, isn't it? That's it. In fact, it was Liz Truss wrote a tweet to the government yesterday. She's very big on the online thing at the moment, isn't she, Liz Truss? Basically saying, you've got to start fracking. Tax cuts and fracking was basically her answer. But drill, baby, drill. Exactly. It's what the Norwegians do. We get a load of our energy from Norway. They're in the same. They're drilling in the same oil, North Sea oil fields that. Or close by, that we should be drilling in. It's mindless. James, thank you very much indeed for that. Claire, a lot of very sensible points. Wish he was a government minister.
He would be very, very good. And he's right with the small modular reactors. That's what we need.
I didn't realise they'd been shelved. I missed that memo.
Oh, well, that's one of the many memos.
But we know that our nuclear power stations are going out of action.
Why not be
so painful.
Advanced?
I love that Charlie Faulkner, Labour peer, former Labour minister, earlier on was saying that I'm too short term. No, I'd have been building this stuff and reservoirs and gas power storage and all the sensible stuff. Oh, deep sighs, everyone. No, we're going to take a quick break. Lord Frost up next. He's saying on a lot of this stuff. That's up next. This is Talk.
across the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
A very good afternoon. Welcome back to the show. I'm Julia Hartley-Brewer. This is Talk, the home of common sense. And whether you're listening on DAB+ radio or on your smart speaker, watching on YouTube or on your connected device, it's great to have your company. Also got the company of Claire Pissell, who's a former Conservative government advisor. Delighted to be joined now by Lord David Frost, Conservative peer, former Cabinet Office Minister and former Chief Brexit negotiator as well. Thank you so much for joining us. Just going to give a heads up to everyone about what we're going to talk about in the next hour of the show. And with you, a lot of this as well. The Treasury ordering cabinet ministers to be ruthless in identifying public spending cuts ahead of the spending review this spring. This as government debt has soared. 10 to 12 billion pounds more this year, and probably the next few years are going to have to be spent servicing our debt, because we're paying more to service our debt per gilt than Greece is, because that seems like a normal thing for a first world country. Also, given the Chancellor's just getting back from China after that trip last week, Labour is warning that has been warned that courting Chinese investment for its renewable energy revolution to hit its net zero targets could leave Britain vulnerable to Beijing. But we've had those warnings for about 10 years. Why are they still doing it? And why does she only fly back with £600 million worth of investment from the world's second biggest economy? And of course, we've got the Prime Minister's speech about AI that was delayed because Wi-Fi went down in the building where they were speaking. I mean, that tells you just how bad things are. As one of our callers said earlier, we are a failed state. And we're going to be talking about the ongoing wildfires in Los Angeles. They've killed at least 24 people now, more than 100,000 people under evacuation orders. The California governor, Democrat Gavin Newsom, has also accused Donald Trump of spreading lies about the fires, as he warned over taking cheap political shots as the city continued to burn. But how true are some of the things that have been claimed, including empty reservoirs? And the BBC TV licence fee could be scrapped by the end of 27. Really? Under plans being considered by the Culture Secretary Lisa Nandy, the network will be funded by general taxation instead. Do you think they'd ever go and actually do that, though? We'll talk about that later. All that coming up. Love to hear your thoughts on everything we're talking about. 0344 499 1000 is a number to call, particularly about Chinese investment, whether that is safe, and also what ruthless spending cuts would you make? Well, let's put some of those questions to my next guest, Lord Frost. Thank you so much once again for joining us. Let's talk first of all about spending cuts. I seem to recall, we spoke to a former Labour cabinet minister about this earlier, that for the last, goodness knows, 14 years, the Labour Party has been saying how terrible it was that there were spending cuts and austerity from 2010 onwards, from Lord Cameron and George Osborne, but now they're looking at ruthless spending cuts. I mean, what's changed?
This is one of the things that makes this this approach so ridiculous. We know they don't believe in reducing spending. As you say, they've spent years advocating the opposite. We're now supposed to believe that all of a sudden they're going to sort of slash and burn in the public sector, having just poured a lot of extra money into the public sector. I just don't believe it. I just don't think they're going to do this.
Do you think they believe it? That's what I always like to know.
I think they're trying to give a bit of a signal. They've already resorted to this let's cut back on waste, which is
you lot used to talk about this as well, and you never did it.
I don't think our record is that much better. We pushed spending up to the then record levels. Now we've been outpaced by the
well done,
Labour
everybody.
Party. Yeah.
And how's that working for us?
It's working badly.
We've got the Prime Minister. This is why we don't take his speeches live. He's still talking. It was late because the Wi-Fi went down, which tells you everything. It just tells you everything about this country. But he's talking about removing blockages for AI technology, and how we could be a global leader. AI is happening. It's going to happen. He's saying it can improve productivity, the private sector and indeed in the public sector. But one of the crucial things is he wants AI technology to be developed here. He wants big companies to stay here. We know some amazing developments in AI have actually come from innovators here. We're really good at this stuff. We've got a lot of really clever people who do this stuff. And then they sell it to an American company or move to America to take their company. We don't see the financial benefits often of it. Why does he think that people are going to want to bring their AI company here or develop an AI company company here, when AI involves the use of extraordinary amounts of electricity. I mean, off the scale levels of electricity, when our energy costs are for business 5 times that of the energy costs of businesses in America.
Yeah, well, that's one of the big problems with this. Obviously, you need cheap energy to make it work, and we're going in the other direction. We're pushing energy prices up. You know, well, there are other problems with this too. He'll have to give up his idea of aligning lots of stuff with the EU if he really wants to generate a proper competitive AI sector. We'll have to get out probably
Why would he have to do
the
that?
GDPR, because the EU believes in regulating everything. There's already some AI products you can't get in the EU because of their regulation. We'll probably have to get out of the GDPR, the data regulation rules of the EU.
Well, that would be a good thing. I genuinely, I think you can improve
thing.
Productivity in this country by about 10% by the fact that everyone doesn't have to click I accept cookies every time they open a website.
Absolutely. That's one part of the problem. The other is the technology is not the only thing, as the AI going down demonstrates. It's how you use it.
Yeah.
I mean, look at how the NHS uses computers. They've been around for 40 years and they're still not using them particularly well.
Fax machines work just as well.
Why is AI going to, suddenly revolutionise public sector productivity? It's how you use it. It's having the incentives. It's having the interest in investing. It's all the things that this government is taking us in the other direction on.
I mean, we've already seen. I mean, we know that productivity of the public sector has absolutely flatlined for 20 years, which is very strange because we were told productivity would go up for everybody because we had mass immigration for years. And mass immigration was going to improve productivity, improve GDP, and it hasn't, which is very strange, isn't it?
I mean, I don't find it strange because,
you're sane.
Immigration, is a substitute for investment and productivity.
One of the reasons why we didn't invest in technology was because you could get cheap labour.
It pushes up the kind of total amount of GDP, but it puts pressure on it per person, and that's what we're now seeing.
I mean, but a lot of where we are that creates difficulties for the economy and growth in the economy is about the cost of energy. I'm saying to Lord Faulkner, former Justice Secretary, Labour peer earlier, there's never been any economy that's seen massive growth which has had high energy costs. I mean, that's just, there are clear charts showing this. Cheap energy costs are absolutely crucial. It's why I desperately want all those countries, developing countries in Africa and Asia and South America, to actually get cheap energy costs and in fossil fuels so that they can develop. We can then sell them things, they can sell us things, and we'll all be better off, and they won't live in mud huts anymore and can have the lifestyle that we have, which is surely what we would all want for those people. But we're in favour of net zero, not just for us, but for them as well. So we're spending billions giving developing countries access to net zero technology, which won't make them richer and the like, won't do anything about climate change anyway. And we're pushing it for ourselves. A lot of Labour courting of Chinese investment is about net zero. But how do you think that could leave Britain vulnerable to Beijing, either economically, military, security-wise, and any other way?
I mean, it obviously will. Net zero, I think, for the developing world is actually an immoral project.
Completely
it's making
agree.
their lives worse. Luckily, they're not listening to us, by and large, on this. For us, it's just a rather stupid project because it's pushing up costs and making our economic growth more difficult. Now, as you say, a lot of the actual product, windmills, solar panels and so on, comes from China, and I don't understand why you would want to make yourself more dependent on China at the moment. It seems like an irrational thing for
maybe they've just not read
the
papers lately. Maybe, I mean, there's a report on the BBC today about people basically in slave labour conditions in China. Maybe the factories of companies like Shein and others. I mean, we know what happens in China. We also know about their hostile intentions towards one of our strongest allies, Taiwan, who, by the way, make pretty much every microchip that we use in our technology. I mean, I don't understand why anyone who's paying any attention at all, who perhaps only watches the BBC 6 o'clock news every day, and that's their only news intake, how they would be wanting to quite literally kowtow to China at this time.
No, I mean, sometimes people who don't watch much news and just use their own good judgment come to better outcomes than those who spend all their time following public policy, and maybe this is the case on this too. It's obvious to me that China is a threat. that they wish us ill. Now, that doesn't mean we ought to get into a massive confrontation with China, but it does mean we ought to be insulating ourselves from what they can do, looking for other suppliers, protecting ourselves elsewhere. And I don't see why you would want to go in the other direction. It makes no sense.
But we are. There's no doubt at all about that. Can I also ask you about a front page story today about benefits? Because we know we've got a huge number of people in this country who are simply not working, and a huge number of people, way more than most other comparable countries, claiming some sort of disability or sickness benefit. 9 out of 10 disability benefit checks and applications are now carried out remotely. Civil servants working from home. How's that working out for everybody? People at home themselves, not being seen in person. We know there's huge levels of fraud on this. I've got a friend who works in benefit fraud and used to work on the counter, literally sitting in the job centre. The level of fraud, it certainly went through the roof when they were all forced to work from home in 2020. It's still happening right now. But do you think we're ever going to get to grips with any of the issues in terms of the huge cost of people not working for whatever reason in this country, while we are allowing most of the public sector to sit working on their sofas with daytime telly on in the background?
I mean, we've got to get to grips with this problem. Unless
you lot didn't. Jacob Rees-Mogg's little passive-aggressive post-it notes on people's desks in Whitehall didn't work.
It's perfectly possible to insist that civil servants abide by their contracts and come into the office. And
they're going on strike.
Sometimes you have to face this down, though I don't expect a Labour government's going to face down the public sector.
Would we notice if they all went on strike?
Well, I think we might, in things like the land registry, for example, or the probate service. That is a problem. But sometimes you have to enforce management's right to manage. And the problem, one of the reasons why working from home is such a problem in the public sector is that management's extremely weak. It doesn't control, and it lets people get away with things, and that's why we're seeing...
So what's your output? Yes, if you get the same number of things done, in fact, if you're working from home, it's more efficient. You should be doing more work rather than less.
Absolutely, and it's not happening.
Again, that's one of the interesting things. Social workers now working from home. I'm not sure the social workers who failed the children who were the victims of the grooming and rape gangs in Rochdale, Rotherham, 48 plus other cities around the country over the last 20 years would have done a better job if they were working from home, and I'm sure they're not doing a better job now. Let's talk about the grooming gangs issue, because also claims and counterclaims that have gone on. The latest one we've had this time last week, we had, yet again, the Prime Minister giving his speech. He was asked a question about the grooming gang story, Elon Musk and the like, and he accused even Tories and Reform and others basically of jumping on the far-right bandwagon. Exactly the language that prevented people from investigating and talking about and doing something about these grooming gangs for so many years, which left thousands of girls being brutally raped, beaten and tortured. Some girls even murdered by these grooming gangs, and no action taken for many years. Wes Streeting of the weekend has talked about how the sort of extreme language, inflammatory language that people are using could actually lead to a sort of a response like the far-right attack in New Zealand a few years ago, where we saw a man machine gun people in mosques. Absolutely horrific. One of the messages he had written on his machine gun was for Rotherham. Nigel Farage has hit back, accusing Wes Streeting of covering up the truth of grooming gangs. We've got more and more Labour MPs. We've got Andy Burnham, the Greater Manchester Mayor, now talking about wanting a national public inquiry. Do you think that ultimately there is going to be a national public inquiry and the government's going to have to give in on this?
I think they may well have to, given the pressure. I think they should. I don't want to see an inquiry like the COVID inquiry, though. I want to see a proper inquiry. It's going so well. That doesn't take too long, is focused, has clear questions and, reports relatively soon, like within a year or so. But I think
Norway's already had that. Most countries have had an inquiry.
They've had COVID inquiries. They've been done. They've it's just us. People get on the bandwagon. But I think the other problem is you've got to be able to discuss these things, and that's why I really disagree with Wes Streeting about the risk of attacks. Maybe there is a risk, I don't know, but you make it greater by suppressing the issue, telling people they can't talk about it, telling people they can't be honest. That is
they
much,
allowed
much
Tommy
worse.
They left a big chasm, and Tommy Robinson walked into that.
Totally. It's this sense that things are going on, we know it, we're not allowed to talk about it, the authorities won't let you. That is what is so corrosive to the kind of social capital that generates this stuff in the first place. We have to be honest. Of course, we shouldn't engage in kind of, sort of aggressive language against minority communities here. Yeah. Most people in the Pakistani community are not abusing their children, and we shouldn't drift into that. At the same time, there is an issue, and that's why we need the inquiry to look at this properly.
Yeah, absolutely. A proper inquiry. And as we know, it's very clear. People say, we've already had an inquiry. No, we didn't. They literally did not look. That inquiry by Professor Alexis J did not look into the grooming gangs. It didn't look into specific areas where it happened. It looked at areas where it hadn't happened. It specifically, didn't. There were no whistleblowers. There were no very few victims who got to have their say. Right. It didn't, as Kemi Bain called it, PMQs, join the dots on this issue.
That's right. The past inquiry was too broad. It looked at too many different things. And
it was more about the churches and institutional...
And as events have shown, it didn't sort of lance the boil. It didn't deal with the issue.
Well, it's partly because the government in which you were a minister didn't actually enact any of the recommendations of the inquiry.
That is almost certainly true, I'm afraid, and I don't think I've been the strongest defender of the previous government's record.
I mean, you did resign
in many areas.
From the government,
indeed,
so
yes.
A bit of a giveaway there. A bit embarrassing for the government. Obviously, this is now sub judice, but a former Labour minister, former MP for Hove, Ivor Kaplan, who rather alarmingly follows me on Twitter. I'm glad I don't follow him, given the large number of erect members of a different kind that are on his social media feed. I mean, you'd sort of think he might have mistakenly posted an occasional photograph, but no, there are an awful lot of them. But he's been accused of engaging in sexual communication with a child. He's been arrested and released on bail by the police. He spent the night in a police cell. Police have launched an investigation into the alleged incident. He was stopped by a group of activists, basically posing as, they say he posed as an underage boy, and he believed he was meeting a 15-year-old child at Hove Station for sex, is the allegation. Now, obviously, that case is sub judice. I don't expect you to comment on those individual allegations. People have a right to, if there are charges brought, a fair trial. Wouldn't want to in any way impact that. However, bit embarrassing for the government, refusing an inquiry when a former Labour MP, who was followed actually on social media by the Prime Minister and others, faced arrest like this.
I mean, it is embarrassing, and as you say, we can't comment on the case, but it is embarrassing, and I've no doubt that those who want an inquiry, and rightly so, are going to take every opportunity they can in the media to keep the story running, and so one can expect more of this sort of commentary on what's going on until the government does what's necessary and grips the issue. And
well,
they just don't seem willing to.
In terms of gripping the issue, the Prime Minister was asked when he finally stopped talking about this AI boom that we're going to see. We're not going to see. He was asked whether Rachel Reeves, his Chancellor, would stay as Chancellor until the next election, following the turmoil in the government bond market. What a surprise, of course. He said he was completely confident in his team. Here's the thing, though. His team also includes Tulip Siddiq, Treasury Minister. Tulip Siddiq's my MP for Hampstead and Highgate. Tulip Siddiq is also the Anti-Corruption Minister. She is being investigated for corruption in Bangladesh. Allegations, lots of claims in the papers. In fact, claims that she actually gave false information in the past to a newspaper about this story, that she is the owner of a flat in King's Cross in North London, which was gifted to her, effectively, by a close ally of her aunt, the former Bangladeshi Prime Minister, ousted from government over claims of, and now being investigated of claims of corruption. Big question marks about this property and where her sources of wealth come from. It's quite clear she was very close to her aunt politically, and well, you're allowed to be close with your aunt. However, the allegations are looking very difficult. She was, we are told, basically forced to refer herself to the Standards investigator. Do you think that when Prime Minister says he has complete confidence in his team, the fact that he has to say that about his Chancellor 6 months into the job, and the fact that he's got a Treasury Minister who couldn't go on the trip to China because of these allegations, do you think both of them are going to stay in their jobs?
Well, I don't think Tulip Siddiq is going to stay in her job. I don't know why Keir Starmer's so determined to defend her.
Apparently they are very good friends. They actually are family friends. No,
yeah, even so, if you're in politics, you've got to be serious about things. And, he's not short of, not particularly competent moralising backbenchers. I'm sure he can replace
could find another
quite
one
easily. fiercely, and she has been known to take quite a high moral tone herself about things over the years. So I think it's very difficult for her. Was
it a silly move to appoint her in the first place? This isn't a particularly new story.
No, it's been rumbling, hasn't it? But I think the full kind of element of it only came out since the government in Bangladesh itself changed and some of the material started to come out. Rachel Reeves, well, once people start asking you whether you've got confidence in your Chancellor, then you've got a problem, because it ought to be taken as read.
As quasi-quatang can attest.
Yes, absolutely. And I think we can all see that Rachel Reeves did mess up the budget, that she has kind of performed a sort of assisted dying act on the economy over the last 3 months, and we're now we're going to be in a recession. The economy is shrinking.
Do you think we are going to have a recession?
I mean, it looks quite likely, at least in GDP per capita terms. It's already falling.
They'll bring a load more people in. That's the solution.
That might be
always the solution.
One part of the solution.
Claire Pistol, listening to all of that, I mean, it is extraordinary. I mean, I remember, I started out as a political journalist, in the late 90s. The idea that there would have been a question to Tony Blair 6 months in, saying, do you still have confidence in your Chancellor, Gordon Brown? I mean, different economic times then, of course. They came in when the economy was booming and the like. But it is extraordinary. There are question marks over not just the Chancellor, but for different reasons, a Treasury Minister.
Normally your Chancellor is taken as read, that you have full confidence in them, everything is absolutely fine, you're on the same page. But it's always the phrase, isn't it? I have full confidence. And you know full well that person is going to be gone by the end of the month.
Yeah.
Whenever a Prime Minister
they've already lost the
Transport
Secretary.
They have, and it didn't take very long. Managed to dispatch her very, very quickly. This one's taking a longer time and shouldn't.
He's very ruthless. I mean, he's an egomaniac. This is not a man who likes to be questioned, I think. I've always thought that psychologically he's not very, he only started having proper questions asked of him in the election. You could see how tetchy he got. He is going to throw Rachel Reeves out like that the first moment he feels that he's needed to do. Don't you think, David?
I do think so. I think he'd be wise to do so. But, of course, there's no point in doing that if you're not going to change the policy, if you're just going to get somebody else in who does exactly the same thing.
Do you think the damage there is already done?
I mean, certainly a lot of damage has been done. They do need to change strategy, credibly, but I don't think they're going to, because the strategy that will produce growth and get the economy going again is not strategy that the Labour Party believes in.
I think you'll find the strategy is going to involve basically tying ourselves to the EU as much as possible, because, of course, the EU economy is all doing so well at the moment. Now, as the former chief Brexit negotiator, we've spoken to you about this many times, there is no doubt at all that there is a bid by Keir Starmer, former shadow Brexit secretary, who spent 4 years desperately trying to stop, 3 years, trying to stop us actually leaving the EU despite that vote, that actually they are going to be bidding to go back in the EU in all but name. Do you fear that the whole of Brexit is going to be undermined?
I mean, of course, they would love to go back into the EU. That's taken as read. The only reason they're saying they won't join the customs union and single market is because they can see public opinion doesn't really like it.
I thought we were told that Brexiteers no longer think it was worth doing. That's what I keep being told. I've not met a Brexiteer who thinks that, but
they know the reality, and that's why they have to go about it in this secretive way. They are aiming to align big chunks of the British economy and trade with the EU again, and to do it
with the thriving
anybody
EU,
noticing.
the thriving EU.
Yeah, and we need to draw. I will do everything I can to draw attention to what they're doing over the next few months and how damaging it's going to be.
We shall try and do so here as well at Talk the Home of Common Sense. It's always a pleasure having a conversation with you. We covered a lot of different topics. Lord David Frost, Conservative peer, former Cabinet Office Minister and former Chief Brexit negotiator as well. Thank you very much indeed for joining us. This is Talk. We are the Home of Common Sense.
across the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Very good morning. No, good afternoon to you. Apologies. This is Talk, the Home of Common Sense. Claire Pearsall still with me, former Conservative Government Advisor. I have to say, I mean, you always just get so much sense from David Frost, don't you, Lord Frost? He's been right about everything on the net zero thing. I really do think that we've got tide turning on the net zero issue, though. I think a lot of people are waking up. I think it's important also that you've got parties like Reform who are actively like, we would drop net zero. But fascinating earlier, 2 hours ago, talking to the former Justice Secretary, Charlie Faulkner, very much still in with the Labour government, very much part of that scene, that North London scene of Labour politicians. He sort of, looked at me with sort of absolute horror, the idea that, yes, I would drop all net zero targets, all of them. That is actually, most British people, if you had a referendum and people sat there with all the facts, rather than having the nonsense that's on BBC Sky and ITV about this stuff, most people are totally unaware that our energy prices are so much higher than other countries because of net zero policy. Most people are totally unaware this won't make any darn difference at all, and things like, but when we import coal-fired manufactured stuff, that doesn't count towards our net zero target, so it's actually dirtier than if we did it. Most people are totally unaware that we could be at blackout like that. We almost went into blackout twice last week, and we're paying a fortune to not be in blackout because of these insane Tory and Labour policies. I think if we had a referendum on it, not that they'll allow us a referendum again because we voted the wrong way, we could get rid of it and drop it, and we could have some sanity.
Exactly. And would we be in the position that older people would be able to afford to heat their house? So you wouldn't have to worry about winter fuel allowance. If you had cheaper energy costs, Mrs. Miggins wouldn't be freezing, would she?
I mean,
it makes perfect sense.
What a silly thing to say, having affordable energy. Also, maybe companies would want to stay here. And this big boom in AI, which of course uses huge amounts of electricity. I wonder if Keir Starmer even knows that. We haven't got enough electricity right now. We're literally like, if the wind doesn't blow and the sun doesn't shine, we are on the cusp of power cuts. But he wants us to all have electric cars. Use use our gas central heating. He wants everything to be powered by electricity, and we're going to have a boom in AI. Where are we getting the electricity? Oh, we'll have AI apart from when the sun doesn't shine and the wind doesn't blow.
But it's not on his auto cue, so he's not going to give you an answer as to where it comes from, because he cannot think outside and wider than the issue in front of him.
Do you think that he knows this stuff? Because I've always heard people go, I'm sure you don't know enough about this. No, I'm not an expert in this. You just have to be able to add it. It's like, when we're talking about stuff with COVID, really just the ability to, read data. You don't have to have a maths degree to be able to do a lot of this stuff. But genuinely, I've got one of those degrees everyone mocks, quite rightly, from Oxford, PP degree, philosophy, politics, and economics degree. Same degree Ed Miliband's got. He's got no one in as of his advisors. None of those people have got any expert degrees in like science or anything like that. But genuinely, he's got no more qualifications than me in this field. How can Ed Miliband look at the same numbers I look at, look at the actual facts, and think that we could achieve net zero or even 95% of net zero, because they cut it down by 5% already within 6 months by 2030. It's not desirable, it's not possible, it's not affordable, it's not going to... You can put it on a tea towel if you want, let alone an Edstone. It's not going to happen. So why are they saying it is?
Because they are so wedded to the idea, and they don't have friends or colleagues to give them a critical
You're right, they have no one to say no.
Yeah. And sometimes you have to do that. Sometimes you have to prod people and say, wake up, Sugar Puff, this doesn't work. And he doesn't have that.
Wake up, Sugar Puff. I'm loving... This is my new friend. Right, I want a new... No, because there's that nice man who does a lot of you're listening to Talk. Can we have a wake up, Sugar Puff, this doesn't work one? I want one of those.
We can have that on a tea towel as well.
I'm now going to cough because I laughed. Sorry, everybody. I've had this for a month. I mean, genuinely, thank God for what's called... We actually have a button in the studio called The Cough. It actually has cough written on it, which I'm constantly pressing when I'm interviewing people. I can do it now. Couldn't hear me, could you? You can now. But anyway, let me get to some of the messages before we go to a break. I'm asking you about... I mean, like Labour courting Chinese investments for its net zero drive amid warnings that could leave Britain vulnerable to Beijing. We had some calls, 0344 499 1000. Welcome to call any time. Lots of people messaging and texting. Richard said, Labour commies are selling Britain to China. Tim says, so Labour's betting Britain's future on China's green tech. Sounds like we're swapping one dependency for another. Jacob says, Labour's love affair with Chinese cash for their net zero plan is playing with fire. Britain could end up at Beijing's mercy. We are. Compromising our sovereignty for green goals. This is an unnecessarily risky game for our national security. Peter says, I think we should trade with whoever we want. Why is it such a bad thing? I mean, presumably you'd have been happy to trade with the Nazis, apartheid South Africa, anyone else who puts people into slave camps. I mean, that's what you're talking about. Joe says, why does it feel like we're being driven over a cliff? The lunatics have taken over the madhouse. Danielle says, just like Africa and South America, Britain is being sold to China. Lefties seem perfectly happy with this. Katie says, in cahoots with the world's biggest polluter, they'll be beholden to China for years. And Curtis says, is this man going for the record of most acts of treachery against the British people in his first year of power? And Clara says, absolutely terrifying. Miliband has to go. Again, I don't think Ed Miliband survives the whole 5 years. No. I don't think Rachel Reeves does. No. I don't think Tulip Sadiq, the Treasury Minister, I don't think she survives the month. Maybe she'll make it to the end of the week because they'll wait for a report back. I think it's all unravelling very, very quickly. Anyway, do get in touch anytime you want, 0344 499 1000. Up next, going to take a break. We're going to be talking about those Californian wildfires and the war of words going on between the Democrats and the Republicans, including the California governor, Gavin Newsom, tipped as a one-day future Democrat president, over my dead body, and Donald Trump, who's going to be president in just a week, over, well, what is the cause of those fires and why have they been able to damage so many homes and kill so many people? Also going to talk about the future of the BBC licence fee with the Sun's TV critic Ali Ross. Could it be true that they could actually scrap the licence fee? But don't worry, you'll still be paying for BBC through your taxes. This is Talk. We are the home of common sense.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
This is Talk, the home of common sense, with me, Julia Hartley-Brewer. 12:38 is time. Claire Pearsall still with me. Delighted to be joined now by Steve Gill, former advisor to both the Clinton and Bush administrations. A very good afternoon to you, Steve.
Hey, and good afternoon, Sugar Puffs.
That's going to sound so wrong in an HR-y sort of way if someone's just tuned in. But yeah, this is something Claire said. But you know what? I love that. That and Empress, those are my two favourite. Right, thank you, Steve. Sugar Puff, right back at you, mate. Let's talk about, I don't think many people are thinking Sugar Puffs about the Gavin Newsom, the Democrat governor of California right now. Look, we've got these wildfires. We now know 24 people have died. You know, we can have sympathy for multimillionaires and actors and celebrities losing their homes, but a lot of very ordinary people have lost their homes. People are dying. These are very, very serious. Now, big debate over these wildfires. Of course, immediately we're told it's all due to climate change, because everything that happens now is due to climate change. But then, of course, people were saying, hold on a minute, you know, again, we've got woodland, we've got forestry where the brush hasn't been cleared, it's very dry. We've got reservoirs that haven't been filled. We've had cuts to the LA Fire Department. We've got claims and counterclaims. Bitter battles going on. Tell us who's claiming what and what their evidence is.
Well, and I don't think Gavin Newsom, who has aspirations of being president of the United States, is going to see the finger-pointing game benefit him. When there is plenty of blame to go around, but the mayor of Los Angeles, Karen Bass, and Gavin Newsom share the lion's share of that blame because, as you mentioned, the water reservoirs were not filled. They have literally let billions of gallons of water, rainwater and snow runoff, flow into the Pacific Ocean rather than be retained to fill water reservoirs that could be used to fight fires. People ask me sometimes, Julia, what is the definition of liberalism? Well, the best definition we can see right now is that in Los Angeles, they had dozens of genders of firefighters, but they didn't have fire hydrants that could work. Yeah. That is liberalism in a nutshell.
Well, there's a lot of talk. I mean, Elon Musk actually a superb tweet. I think some of his tweets are certainly on our grooming gangs issue are rather intemperate, but it made the very valid point that when you have DEI, people die. And there's diversity, equity, and inclusion thing. So all of these senior figures, now, they may be the best people for the job. We have no idea of knowing, given DEI policies where people are given preference because of their sexuality, their sex, their race and everything else. But we got sort of three lesbian women with virtually the same first name. One's woman, one's a black woman, one's a black lesbian woman. People are just ticking every single box. No one trans that I've noticed yet, but I'm sure there is. And basically going on and on about this stuff, giving money to gay pride and trans pride events and the like. But, you know, fundamentally, people pay their taxes in California to pay for a fire department that can fight fires. And you can't fight fires if you haven't got the equipment, you've sent it to Ukraine, or you're all busy painting your rainbow lanyards, or you haven't got any sodding water in the fire hydrants.
Well, and they've been using these planes to drop this red chemical to try and restrain the fire. And the whole idea of what they've been doing in not clearing brush and not clearing off the tinder is because they want to protect the environment. What do you think this red chemical is doing in the water systems and to the animals? Meanwhile, the Canadians have loaned planes that literally scoop up the ocean water that is literally hundreds of yards away from the fire in some cases and dumping ocean water. And they're concerned about the salt water. The chemicals are worse. And I think, again, when you're painting the fire hydrants in rainbow colors, when you've got one of the fire chiefs who was asked about the fact that, you know, some of these women that are very small in stature, are they capable of carrying a 200-pound man out of a fire? Well, if he's in the fire, he made a mistake and is in the wrong place.
Yeah. That was an extraordinary video. Well, I mean, this is the thing. It is extraordinary, but also we've got all these claims and counterclaims. It's difficult for people to know what is true and what is not. So we had claims that all the reservoirs were empty. Now, that's not true. We know, but then Gavin Newsom said all the reservoirs were full. Also not true. We know for a fact that at least one reservoir in the Palisades was not full, and it was not full for political reasons. I mean, that they know that their policies. But we also know about, and this has been an ongoing issue. It was an issue in Hawaii with those horrific fires that caused a lot of loss of life and damage to homes. But it's been an issue in pretty much everywhere, and certainly with California and fires, which have now become a staple of the news sort of cycle in recent years. It's a failure to actually clear the debris, would clear, the dead wood and the like. And that used to be the policy, but then it became eco and unfashionable to not clear that because it was much more, natural environment, despite the fact that that's how you avoid wildfires. And in his first day in office in 2019, Gavin Newsom pledged to do more and better on wildfires. But an investigation by NPR. Now, NPR is the BBC on communist steroids. I mean, it's as left-wing as you can get. This is not an anti-democrat new radio station. National Public Radio found that despite these claims that 90,000 acres would be managed responsibly and brush cleared, in reality it was less than 12,000 acres, and he deducted $150 million from California's wildfire prevention budget. So those are established facts. But we've now got Donald Trump getting in on the act and basically accusing Gavin Newsom, who many would think of as a rival. He's someone who's been tipped as a future presidential candidate. I said I think Americans would be genuinely insane to elect this man. But basically saying that you stopped a plan that we had to help you with water in California. Is that true?
Well, actually, Donald Trump was warning 3 to 6 months ago of exactly what has happened here, that if you didn't clear the brush, if you didn't make sure the water was being reserved, if you weren't stopping water reservoirs because of a 2-inch fish that they were concerned about, all of the things that Donald Trump warned about specifically have led to these fires. Now, let's be fair, Julia. Gavin Newsom is to blame. The mayor is to blame. These fire chiefs are to blame. But the voters in California and Los Angeles are to blame. Yeah. They keep electing these nitwits back in office. And at what point do they learn you can't keep banging your head against the wall and then complain about a headache?
Yeah, I mean, that is the point, isn't it? And again, what's fascinating is deploying the National Guard and others to prevent looting from a lot of these areas where people have had to evacuate. Because suddenly now Gavin Newsom thinks that looting is something that shouldn't be allowed, when we've basically seen the legalisation on a wide scale of looting, police refusing to get involved. And again, we've had defunding of the police, all Black Lives Matters. And again, a lot of the celebrities losing their homes, and many of the people, they voted for this guy, they voted for these policies, they supported it publicly and on social media, and now it's all coming back to bite them very, very hard on the butt.
Well, and Joe Biden has ignored the aftermath of Hurricane Helene in western North Carolina, eastern Tennessee, yet he flew into California, into Los Angeles, which grounded the air crews trying to put out the water so he could come in and do a quick photo op.
Wow.
Again, the dementia-ridden president is constantly making things worse rather than better. Thank God we only have about a week to go before his destructive impulses, continue to bear bad fruit.
Well, I mean, I don't know how much his visit did any help, but we certainly know that there was massive help to the people who were suffering from losing their homes, some losing family members, pets, from Meghan and Prince Harry making a visit to visit their Californian loved ones at this time. Of course, California is her home state. They live in Montecito. They turned up. Apparently, they were actually doing some actual useful charitable stuff, but there's a lot of cameras around when they were hugging people. A lot of people might have said, haven't the people involved in the fire suffered enough? They don't need a visit from Meghan. But she also announced, I thought hilariously, that she was going to delay the launch of her Netflix cooking series because she wanted to focus.
By the way, one of my favorites is one of my friends commented as he was watching Meghan and Harry get married, said, she looks just like that girl who starred in Suits. I said, it is the girl who starred in Suits. I mean, people couldn't even make that connection, but they have certainly been high profile in recent weeks.
Well, yes, but I mean, I'm wondering how well that's gone down. We know the actress Justine Bateman has apparently labelled Meghan Markle and Harry as disaster tourists after they turned up. What do you make of that?
Well, at least they haven't been to Haiti like some of the other celebrities do from time to time and visit, and yet no money ever makes it to help people there. Yeah. Look, this is a horrific tragedy. As you mentioned, the death toll is now up to 24, is likely to rise. And sadly, because of the regulations that California put in place, insurance companies couldn't raise their rates despite the fact that fires are as seasonal as tornadoes and hurricanes. So they canceled insurance. So a lot of the people who've lost their homes have zero insurance to rebuild. Yep. The regulations in California, if you want to build a garden in your backyard, it may take a year to get approval. Yeah. It's going to take forever if people have the resources to rebuild homes. The regulatory abuses, the tax abuses, if you still have a charred building on your property, you still have to pay your property taxes for a home that's not there. If you have a mortgage for a home that's not there, you still owe the mortgage. These people haven't even seen the financial destitution that is coming to them.
Yeah. And again, you will say, well, a lot of these people are very rich, but they're not very rich. They can take the hit of losing a $2 or $3 or $4 million home. There are going to be a lot of lawsuits, aren't there?
Yes, and should be, and frankly, the state of California has continued to see people flee. A lot of these people are saying they're not going to rebuild, they're done, they're leaving.
Yeah.
My advice, I'm in Tennessee, Julia. Don't come here. We're full. Kentucky is nice. There's other great states.
I thought everyone was going to Texas now.
Here. Yeah, go. Well, actually, Texas, Tennessee, South Carolina, Florida. That's where all the states are moving. U-Haul has decided to quit sending U-Haul units to California because they're one-way deals. People leave, but they're not traveling to California. So the exit from California is going to cost them members of Congress, electoral votes, and tax dollars.
Absolutely extraordinary. It's an amazing story, and again, it goes so much further than just the actual, lives of people, their lives, the destruction. We shall wait and see, and no doubt we'll be talking to you more in the next week or so, of course, as we see Donald Trump's inauguration 1 week today. Steve Gill, Sugar Puff, thank you very much for joining us. Again, if you've just tuned in, that won't make sense. Former advisor to Clinton and Bush administrations. Claire Pearsall, what did you start? Your thoughts, just the wildfires and where we are there?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's really telling that the lawsuits will come, as Steve just said.
But it'll be the taxpayer who ends up paying for the failures.
Yeah, it will.
But again, this is sort of it's like woke policies, mad environmental policies.
When will they learn?
It's about DEI hires. It's about just not paying attention to the actual. It's so many public services just don't do the actual job that they're paid to do. They just do all their wokeism instead of just like, you need to have water in the fire hydrant so you can fight fires.
And they will not learn from this, and that's the really sad aspect.
Gavin Newsom is awful. He's also one of those massive lockdown fanatics who, of course, was caught out at a restaurant, at a secret restaurant, where he was off because the rules don't apply to him. Yeah, I loathe this man. I mean, no one's going to love him as much as he loves himself. Also, mate, take your glasses off when you're talking to people. It shows the man is awful. It's going to be very good fun when he runs the Democrat presidency, which is definitely what he's going to try and do. 12:50 is time. We'll take a break. Then we're going to be talking to the brilliant Ali Ross at The Sun about the possibility we're hearing that the BBC licence fee could be at an end in just a couple of years. Cancelled by Labour. Don't worry, though. Your taxes will still pay for the beep. I know. You're so happy about that. That's up next. This is Talk.
We are heading towards stagflation, where inflation is persistently higher than the Bank of England wants, and yet we've got no growth. And this is all because of the disastrous blunder budget. I mean, the truth is that Rachel Reeves and Keir Starmer, they have crashed the economy.
They have.
I mean,
no
they have made the Liz Truss Kwasi Kwarteng budget literally look like a walk in the park, a breeze compared to what is going on at the moment.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
This is Talk, the home of common sense. I now have to resist the urge to call everybody Sugar Puff after Claire Piss or Sugar. If you weren't listening the last half hour, well, I mean, frankly, why weren't you? Letter from your mum, please. But anyway, Sugar Puff, Ali Ross is here, TV critic at The Sun, to discuss what is brilliant news for a lot of people rather unhappy about paying for the absolute nonsense that comes out on the BBC these days. BBC TV licence fee could be scrapped, according to plans being considered by the Culture Secretary. That is the good news, Ali, isn't it?
Sugar Puff, we're going with that, are we?
Well, apparently that's what everyone's calling me. Don't. It's a long story, Ali. You should have been listening earlier rather than talking to the producer, trying to get online. But we're told this is good news because we could get rid of the licence fee. The bad news, of course, is that it would still be our taxes paying for the licence fee.
Yeah, this at the moment you can, of course, opt out of paying the licence, which is what hundreds of thousands of people have done, which is probably what's prompted this more than anything else.
Yeah.
It would be my guess that a Labour government would find a tax that you simply cannot opt out of, and you would be stuck with exactly the same BBC post-2027 as the one we've got now, which is linking everything to climate change and posing Israel as the bogeyman of the international world. Yeah. This is also what governments tend to do when they're in a bit of a sticky patch, is throw some shade at the BBC without really meaning it. And there's absolutely nothing behind this. Yeah. Lisa Nandy, in common with the rest of this government, which seems to ask other people for their ideas, hasn't got one itself.
Yeah. It's very. I love. One of my favourite things this week is that they're going to be meeting people on Thursday to regulators to suggest ideas to them about how to do growing the economy. You think, I'm not sure regulators are the best people to do that, but there we are. Ofcom included. No. How is Ofcom going to be involved in improving the economy and productivity? But this is the thing. A lot of people, as you say, are not paying their licence fee anymore. A lot more people were, forced to pay it. Older people who didn't get, not getting the free licence fee anymore. But a lot of people are just saying, I just don't want to watch live television anymore. It's utterly useless. But I have to say, look, I have to pay my licence fee because I do watch live TV. I can't break the law, a position that I'm in. But I really resent it. I watch so little on the BBC now, and I would like the BBC to remain, and I'm quite happy for public funding of the BBC, but only if it goes back to its remit of being a public service broadcaster. And so that it, as you say, it doesn't... I mean, I think blatantly anti-Semitic coverage in the news about Israel and Hamas. Nonsense. I mean, absolutely ridiculous nonsense about climate change on a daily basis. Completely inaccurate, most of its reports.
It's a monstrous organisation.
I mean, the trans ideology that it pushes on children... Oh, sorry, we lost it. I think we've got you back. But again, the trans ideology is pushing. It's now become incredibly political. But the one real requirement of the...
Sorry, I lost you, Julia.
Oh, sorry, I think we've got it back there. But the one real requirement of the BBC is that they should be politically neutral, and that's the one thing they really, really aren't.
No, it's absolutely laughable. It's a monstrous organisation as well. It's probably gone... people haven't noticed. They have a Kenya bureau in Africa with 300 journalists.
What?
300 journalists working out of Kenya alone. That's just an example of the excess. The worst one for me, though, is what it's done to local journalism.
Yeah.
Which at some point, and none of us ever gave our permission for this, the BBC decided it was a publisher as well as a broadcaster, started stealing local news.
Yeah.
Not producing any of its own, and it's effectively put hundreds of local newspapers out of business, or they're down to skeleton operations.
Yeah.
Because of this vast bureaucracy that sits at the centre of Britain.
Yeah, and can fund everything because they've got billions and billions of our money. And as you say, if we did get rid of the licence fee, at least people have the option right now of not paying it, whether legally or not. But you're not going to get away with not paying your other taxes, or when they're not ring fenced. You have no choice. Ali Ross, sorry our time was so short. I'm glad we got the line back. TV critic at The Sun. Thank you very much indeed for joining us. Claire Pearce, I mean, again, I just think the BBC got themselves into this mess. It's entirely self-created.
They absolutely have. And can you imagine how well it's going to go for the Labour government to say penny on the income tax to pay for the BBC?
I don't think it's quite a penny, but it might be. I mean, again, if we're looking at waste, yeah, I can tell you how to cut a lot of waste. There you are. Thank you very much indeed, Claire, for joining us throughout the show. Ian Collins is here now. Tell us what's happening. How are you?
I tell you what, I'm
Sugar
all right.
puffed?
I'm all right. Thank you, Treacle.
All right, darling. All right, darling.
All right, doll.
Cup of sugar.